What's up, everybody? Welcome to You Rankin with me. Today we're doing Star Wars. I'm your one of your hosts, Chad, and we have the other host over there, James, and
Hey,
then
what's up, everyone?
our regular guest, Kerri. How's it going, everybody?
Doing really well. Yeah.
Going great. All right, ready for some Star Wars. But that's not it. We have two other amazing guests. You've seen them before, so I'm going to go ahead and bring those guys on. We have Charles Mullen, and then we also have Dylan Randazzo. What's going on, guys?
I got a yellow cup.
All right.
Doing good.
So Charles got his yellow cup. We all got our list. And we're ready to talk Star Wars. Star Wars is a very classic franchise that's still, kind of going strong, especially in the TV realm. But we're just focusing on movies today. We're going to rank the 11 movies. I think we all have kind of differing levels of enjoyment and love of Star Wars, but I think we all love it in our own way, and we're going to express that by saying how we rank these things. So how the show works is we're going to go through our pre-made lists of how we would rank these 11 films. So then, after we, so if basically what happens is if you get, if someone says a movie that's in your top 5, I want to say, because we're doing 11, just give us a wait on it, wait for it, hold off on that. Hey, I got that higher, whatever you want to say to let us know you like that movie a little bit more. And, so we can talk about that, in its proper place for you. That's basically how it works. We'll start with one person, and then we'll just kind of go around. And if people have a movie low enough, we'll talk about it then and there, and then we can go ahead. But first, let's just quickly start off and just say what kind of Star Wars means to you. Who wants to start first with this? Go ahead, Kerri.
Yeah, go for it, Kerri.
Underwhelming. I enjoy Star Wars, but I wouldn't say I'm a giant Star Wars fan. But I think it's a really fun franchise, and I guess we're pretty into it though, because we do like our Christmas tree is topped with Yoda in a Santa suit. Our little tree skirt is Baby Yoda, Grogu. So.
Yeah, I would say I'm kind of very similar, where I've grown an appreciation for the classics recently, and I've loved a lot of the later ones because that's kind of where I started. I didn't watch them as I was a kid or anything like that, and so I started to get into them as the I would say the Disney sequel trilogy kind of started, is when I really was all right, let me actually sit down and watch all of these and go through them and get really excited for these new movies coming out. And the trilogy happened the way it happened, but there's still some great movies in there, I think. And so that's kind of where I am. So I think I can still appreciate the iconography, a lot of the characters, and just have a lot of fun with it, because it's just one of the greatest franchises. So James, how do you feel about Star Wars in general?
I mean, overall, I think it's a pretty cool series. I obviously watched the original 3 when I was younger, so it was cool to get that kind of introduction to them. I think it set the bar kind of high for what followed, for sure. But I've always enjoyed seeing them. My friends and I would always go to when the prequel series came out. We were always in the theaters. We were marathon watching them before seeing the last one. I see them probably a few times in the movies. I never really watched them through much of a critical eye, so I didn't care about how bad the first 3 were. I think by the time I got to the last 3, I was really? This is what they're going with still? So I think I like the original ones more than these ones, but I can always appreciate how they try to at least carry the story and what put on the screen. I will say I've always through all the movies, Star Wars has always gotten the ship design really, really well. The weapon designs are really cool, the armor and the troop designs are awesome. So there's always something cool to take away from the movies. It's not always the storyline itself. I've always been able to watch them for that.
It is the greatest blending of sci-fi and fantasy. So Charles, how do you feel about Star Wars?
Yeah, for me, I think Star Wars represents the birth of loving science fiction. I love Star Wars more for what it got me started into rather than what Star Wars is itself. I feel like Star Wars is a great entryway into science fiction. And it's becoming more diverse as it goes on. And so I love Star Wars for that, just because it was the first gateway into me getting eventually into Battlestar Galactica. And even though Star Trek came first, it got me into Star Trek too, because as a kid, I don't know how you advertise Star Trek to kids. It's like, it seems extremely boring for kids at first. And then you keep watching, you're like, oh, okay, I get it. And so, like, for Star Wars, that got me into it. And it got Maggie into it too. Maggie says, I like Star Wars. I like Star Wars. Okay, that's me.
All right, Dylan, how do you feel about Star Wars?
Yeah, I mean, as everyone said, it's a great building of a world that I think is even more impressive in the fact that there's no source material to really go off of. You know, like a lot of the
Good point.
Marvels and the DCs and even Lord of the Rings, and they've all come from. Whereas here, it's like this George Lucas's mind from the get go. He didn't have anything to really branch it out of. Obviously, the Kurosawa films, obviously a huge inspiration, but like he started this all from scratch essentially and created such a rich world in just one film, and then the first three films, and then just seeing how it's expanded over time, the visual styles, just the way you can kind of look at each era of Star Wars and see where we were as a society and the technology we had, like the prequels and how those look versus the new ones and how they look, and like this more Disneyfied era, and just to see the growth of cinema. These movies are really interesting because they're all big high concept, but they have such different strategies and means about going to make them throughout each one, which I always find fascinating when I watch them all through. I always watch them in release order, not in chronological order, just because I love to see the progression of the styles and the and kind of have that sense of feeling that the audiences had watching them growing up, because obviously I wasn't around for the first three, and yeah, I was around for the prequels, but I didn't see the first
Barely.
two prequels. I saw the third theaters, and that actually introduced me to Star Wars, and from then on I was hooked. Yeah, just such a rich world they built. The fact that there are books and encyclopedias written about all the different concepts of Star Wars that all just came from one singular mind at the start, like that's just so impressive to me, that we have our own verbiage of these concepts and things that didn't exist in 76, and now they're like that's just really cool, and that's what I like about it. It's myth and just the world building and how it's been so immersed in culture. Yes, there are some duds. Yes, there are films that aren't perfect, but I just think the overall ambition of every single one of these, even the one I have at 11, is enough to make me appreciate every single one to some extent.
Absolutely. And with that, all right. So now we're going to get into our rankings. We're going to start with our number 11 because we're only doing the live action Star Wars films. We're not doing like the Clone Wars or, anything like that, or the shows or anything. I'm going to start with my number 11 here. And I don't know if this is a hot take or not, but my number 11 is The Rise of Skywalker. Kerri, what is your number 11?
Attack of the Clones.
Okay. James, what is your number 11?
The Rise of Skywalker.
Charles, what is your number 11?
Rise of Skywalker.
Dylan, what is your number 11?
Solo.
Okay. All right. So no one said wait for it. So Rise of Skywalker is not in anybody's top 5. So we can go ahead and talk about this now. And then, we'll find out where it ranks for Kerri and Dylan later. I'll go ahead and start. So I'm going to show I really, really love The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. I know there's a hot take in there, I guess, probably. It seems 50-50 these days with the Last Jedi. But these are kind of like the movies that like got me into the franchise. Even though like I'm a little older, I still just didn't get into them until a little bit later. And I think even though there wasn't that like 100% connectivity between The Force Awakens and Last Jedi, I still think those two movies are great on their own. And there is some connectivity. I'd say more than there is more than there isn't. And I think because of the toxicity of the Star Wars, not the entire Star Wars fan base, but a good vocal minority of the Star Wars fan base, hated The Last Jedi so much that I guess the studio got so scared maybe about it. And then J.J. Abrams, who is a great director on his own, was kind of like against like the coin. He's like, well, I have to do what the studio's telling me and I have to whatever. So they basically just kind of made a movie to undo the previous movie. If you ever do like improv or anything like that, they say do yes and don't just say no, that's not right what you just said and do your own thing. Say yes and, because then it makes it flow better, it makes it work, and you can just say, all right, well, Rian Johnson didn't do everything that we wanted him to do with his movie, but let's continue what he threw out so we can at least have a through line throughout the thing. And I feel like because they undid a lot of the stuff from that previous movie to connect it more to the first movie, I don't think it works at all. I don't like any of the story. I think the characters are worse in this. I think it's mostly just action to try to hide, like cover over the fact that there's no actual story there, and it's not really interesting. They try to make you care about like, oh, Chewie's dead, or no, he's not. And it's just like these like little things that never really matter. They were setting up so much great stuff with like Rey and Kylo, and then they just kind of throw that away, and it just like really makes me sad. Because I think Adam Driver's Kylo Ren is one of the best things in Star Wars, and I don't like him in this movie. And yeah, I just really don't enjoy this one. It just feels like the worst kind of like fan service, but a fan service that's like trying to undo everything that came before it. So that's where I stand with this. And unfortunately, we're gonna have to pause there.
No, it's okay. Why don't I go?
All right.
And then
you go, and then I'll start. I'll start
with
with James, and then we'll get back to you. If you need me to lift anything for you, just let me know. Okay.
Sorry. Okay. So I'll go on.
All right.
Are you done?
Let me count you in.
Okay.
And then give it a pause.
All right. So for me, Rise of Skywalker, definitely not in my top 5. Although for me personally, I do enjoy this better than quite a few other movies, basically all of the prequels and Solo. I agree 100% with everything Chad said. Like, I do think a lot of what this movie suffers from is like, they were clearly going one direction with The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. Like, those two movies, I think, flow pretty well together. And then Rise of Skywalker just undoes everything from Last Jedi. And I don't really understand why, when they were making these movies, they either just did, like, they could have hired just one director to do all 3, or they could have at least, like, had Rian Johnson and J.J. Abrams in, like, a room to, like, collaborate on the entire storyline. They knew they were doing a trilogy, so I don't really understand why it was, like, so disjointed. And I don't know. Otherwise, though, I think it's, like, a decent movie. Like, I enjoy watching it. I don't know. I really enjoyed the characters in this trilogy. So even just watching a lot of the characters in this trilogy still, for me, holds a lot of value and entertainment.
Yeah, absolutely. And also just like the fact that like The Last Jedi ends with this really cool revelation that she's not special, but she is, because she makes herself special. She doesn't have to be connected to anything. And then Rise of Skywalker's like, no, you have to be connected. You have to be a Palpatine or a Skywalker, or else you're not important, and we don't care about you. But yeah, James, how do you feel about The Rise of Skywalker?
Yeah, that was definitely my least favorite of all 11 movies, and it's definitely at the bottom for me. I find this one just forgettable. I watched it in the theater. I watched it recently for this ranking, and I can't pick out very many scenes or plot pieces or even lines of dialogue from this, like, just at all. Like, I don't know why my brain just kind of tunes this one out, but like, they bring back Palpatine, which, again, I know we'll talk about this in a lot of rankings. I mean, Hollywood loves their off-screen deaths because they got to get thrown down some big-ass shaft and explode in some electrical fire thing at the end of the sixth one. I mean, Return of the Jedi, and all of a sudden he's back. Like that's what pull out of the file cabinet for plot devices is we're gonna bring back Palpatine. Like I don't know. To me, that didn't really work that well for me. It just seemed like it repeats itself way too much. I can't remember much about this. Like she force stops one of the vehicles from flying away, so there's some new like force power or something like that. But I remember about this. This is probably my least favorite, and I agree. Like it goes farther off from what the Last Jedi did, and tries to do all that. It really undoes like Finn, which I was actually kind of really looking forward to. And shoot, what was his name? Not Poe. Finn. I'm sorry, I didn't mean Finn. Yeah. So we were getting all these new characters in the Force Awakens, and then even into the Last Jedi, it even seems like they kind of took away from what I thought they were going to do with the characters, and they just did even less with them this time. So this to me is just the 11th one, least favorite. One thing I would have done though, if I was the Final Order and I had all those rebels up the side of my starship, I would have just taken the thing and just tilted it and let them slide right off of it, and there goes the villain. Sorry guys, but that's what I would have done. So
yeah, and
they
even
were on the side of my ship, I would have tilted it to one side and just let them kind of slide off. Just finish that right there.
That's funny. And even adding like little Babu Frick as he's adorable and he's hilarious, but he's not enough for me to really
Right. Yeah, I agree.
Charles, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, I'm with all of you. It's forgettable, and even worse, it's cowardly. It is just it is one of the most cowardly movies I've ever seen made by a major studio. It's someone that had no guts, someone that saw a bunch of people get really angry about Luke Skywalker not, I don't know, doing a few backflips and fighting Kylo Ren like for real, like getting so upset about that when they could just watch Empire and Return of the Jedi to get that instead. And then they're like, oh no, we got to satisfy all the people that were really angry and harassed the actors. We got to make those people happy. Yeah, that's not a smart decision. And it failed because those people aren't going to show up and watch your movies. And why would we even care to watch your movies if you have no sense of like, yeah, this is the story I want to tell. I think other parts of it that it commits that we could maybe say quote unquote are crimes are it invalidates the significance of the original story. The original story is about at least Anakin trying to redeem himself, the fall of the Emperor, the fall of the Empire, and the Emperor's he's just back in this one. Sorry.
With like
So
a zero explanation, yeah.
zero. The original, it kind of destroys the original trilogy in that way. It mischaracterizes the Emperor as well. The Emperor for the first 6 movies, he is someone that works from behind the scenes, works within systems of power. He does not really work outside of systems of power. He works within the systems of power. But in this one, he just is like a mechanical spider, and he's like underneath like a volcano. I no idea like who is this, the same guy that like got in front of the Senate like maimed and was just like the Jedi ruined me like in full display? No, he's just like at the bottom of a volcano now pulling strings. I just don't even understand. Or he's at the bottom of something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. And
No,
you know that they really are just trying to force it because it's literally like they announce it in the opening crawl. It's like not even like a surprise scene where she goes, Palpatine or anything like that. And
just,
I don't know.
Yeah,
but
he's just back.
We've all been pretty negative about it, but I think Dylan likes this one a little bit more, but I'll let him tell you about it.
I like him more. I like him more than y'all. I don't love it in the sense that like I think it is a mess, but I think it still never loses sight of the core themes, which is hope and light and kind of legacy in a way. I actually do think it pays respects to the 3 original characters well. Like I like how Han Solo is the one who has that moment with his son to kind of
It is a
turn
good
him
moment
and change him. Like I think the moment with Leia is a really fun end off. They do that respectfully. I like how Luke has his integral part in Rey's story. I think they get a lot of that right. I think it kind of bites off a little more than it can chew. But I do think it did have a tough task because from a business angle, they do want to try to get the fans back that didn't like Last Jedi, but you also have to try to keep the fans that did like it. So it's a tough task either way. I think Chad said it best. J.J. Abrams is a great director, so I think it still looks really interesting. Like I like the kind of Palpatine dark cavernous feel. Like it kind of has a cool dark sinister vibe. It's a little muddled in its visuals, but I think overall the effects are pretty nice. I like the fight with all the water and Kylo and Rey. I actually do like the idea that um if they're gonna retcon the whole Rey's parents or nobodies thing, I like the idea that Kylo was the one to deliver the news because he's always kind of been like this immature kind of child in a man's body, and the fact that like he did lie to her makes a little more sense than if like Luke had said it. Like if Luke had been like, Rey, your parents were nobodies, that would have been a little bit more like, well, how do you retcon that? But I think because it was Kylo who said it to her in Last Jedi, as almost you can kind of look at back at it as almost like a manipulation tactic of like I'm just gonna say this to her so she like joins me or whatever, because they have that epic fight in Last Jedi, which we'll talk about later, but like with the throne room with Snoke and all that. So I like that, at least that makes a little bit more sense that Kylo is almost like an unreliable narrator in that sense. But again, the Palpatine stuff, it is far-fetched. Like I think this is a messy movie. I don't like the Chewie scene. It's my least favorite scene in all 11 movies because it's like, why? Just don't do it.
I
Either
still
kill
don't
him off and
understand what happens there.
yeah, kill him off and make it this epic send-off, or just don't do that. Like it was so stupid. But again, like I still think it gets at the end. It gets to the core of what this franchise means to me, and that's the hope, that's the joy. Like Rey's story in particular, they do a really good job fleshing out. And yes, they kind of let Poe and Finn and Rose especially fall by the wayside. But again, like I think Rey's story is really successful, and her whole last moment of her, with the new lightsaber, it's kind of like passing it on to the new generation. I kind of like it. It's a little cheesy, but I do dig it. I don't know. I think there is still a lot of heart, and because it is a difficult task, I don't think anyone would have made a great movie. I mean, maybe they would have, but I don't think anyone would have made a movie that pleased everyone. And I think it was either we go for something a little bit more broad and retcon some things and still try to end on a high note, or we fledged down the Ryan Johnson path and piss off even more people. Because I think, honestly, the Rise of Skywalker reception was even less volatile than Last Jedi. And I just think no studio wants that. And it's tough. Like, that's just a tough corner you're backed into. So I don't envy them. But again, like, it's a mess, but at the same time, it's a mess that I still think has a lot of heart, despite all the corporate studio underpinnings. Like I think it does have its attempts at it, and I really do like the Kylo Ray stuff at the end. I think it's a fitting ending for Kylo's arc as a growth arc. Yeah, film I gotta watch a few more times to really fully flesh out my opinions. But again, I think just the attempt to pull it off, I admire, even though they didn't stick the landing 100%. But I do think there are other films that I just don't enjoy as many scenes from. It's a tough one to talk about. There's a lot. It's also so new that it's like maybe if they were to make a 10, 12, maybe we'll get a better sense of what this means. But also as a conclusion, it's like, how do you conclude 8 movies and make it satisfying for everyone? I just think there was no way they were going to do that. And the things I liked about it were enough to outweigh the bad for me. But still bottom tier, but not the worst.
Yeah, definitely. And like, it's interesting because I know we've all mostly been like pretty negative about it. But I have a lot of movies that I'm like that with, where everybody craps on, and yet I'm like, I kind of like that one. Not with this
2,
one.
Anchorman 2.
Anchorman 2.
Halloween Ends. Spider-Man 3. There's a lot that I like that people usually crap on. So I get it.
The Halloween Ends thing is a good point because it's like I think if you look at it as a trilogy, it's a very bad trilogy capper. But if you look at it as its own movie, if it came out just on its own, it was like, this is a story about this girl, and like I think it'd be okay,
And I tried to watch Rise of Skywalker like that, where I'm like, okay, on its own, do I like it? I didn't, but I've only seen it. I didn't actually finish it the second time, so 1.5 times I've seen it.
For me, it's like, and I probably should have explained this first before I gave this take, but like the way I'm organizing this list is movies that like return to the binary of Jedi good, Sith bad are going to be ranked low in my estimation, because I just think that is such an uninteresting story that we've seen throughout, and Star Wars has provided numerous opportunities and invitations for more nuanced storytelling. And oftentimes, because it changes hands so frequently, they fail to go the full Monty and actually execute that story. And for me, I saw the rise of Skywalker returning to that binary of Palpatine bad, Rey good, Kylo Ren you're bad, but if you do this, you're good again. And I just feel like, especially with Kylo Ren, it's such a bummer to see him go out the same way, basically, that Vader did, when he's such a different character, and he went through arguably possibly more trauma than Anakin did, and it's just like, okay, sorry, you've just done too much. You're like dead now. Like, sorry, like at least you saved somebody else, like Vader did. So I guess we'll remember you in a positive light. But I just feel like I would have liked to see the story of Kylo Ray actually like redeeming himself over a long period of time, of constantly people underestimating him or people doubting him because of his actions previously. I find that story so much more entertaining than let's kill off the guy that like was a villain but now decided to be good again. It's just
Yeah.
I saw that already. That was Return of the Jedi. Oh, and it was against the Emperor too. Oh, it was the same thing basically.
Yeah.
Wait, they were having this big battle out. It's just like, man, I've already seen this.
Yeah. And,
so
and
that's
it
really
kind of
it's frustrating for me.
it kind of reminds me of the quote from Army of Darkness, which is like, good, bad, I'm the guy with the gun. And it's like, you know,
Sure.
that's what it's saying, is like it's more interesting when the morals are kind of muddled and you can like kind of decide where you side with, instead of the movie telling you this is good, this is bad. Boom, good versus bad. I mean, it's interesting sometimes, but I totally get where you're coming from, Charles, where you're like, you know, I like to be able to decide, like people watching The Karate Kid and they're like, no, actually Johnny's the hero of the movie.
Yeah, and I mean and I think it's gonna hurt me on this list. I think some of you might be like surprised at some of the movies I have on that list, because that is just how I'm ranking them. Like I'm being very critical on any mention of romanticizing the Jedi, because I think the Jedi are awful. I'm gonna be really critical about any mention about the Sith being outright evil, because I just think that's just like a shame too.
Yeah, and I just want to, because I want to get this moving forward, but we are totally accepting of hot takes.
Oh yeah.
Our friend Hunter had a very big one during the Halloween one, and then James kind of had a pretty big one in our Scream ranking.
Oh,
so I love when people come out with the hot takes. I may have some a little bit later, so we'll see. Let's go on to our number 10s finally, and we'll start with Kerri for her number 10.
Okay, my number 10 is Solo.
All right, James, what is your number 10?
The Last Jedi.
All right. That's a wait for it for me. Charles, what is your number 10?
Last Jedi and Solo are wait for me.
Okay.
Attack of the Clones is my number 10.
Okay, Dylan, what is your number 10?
This is probably a wait for it for some of you, but I put Rogue One, a Star Wars story, at 10.
It's not for me.
It's not for me.
Yeah, that's a wait.
Oh, Kerri, did you say it's a wait for you?
Yes, yeah,
all right.
James.
And my
already things are getting diverse.
And my number 10 is Solo as well. And Charles said wait for it on that. So wait, Charles, did you say wait for it on Solo?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in my top 5.
Okay.
So is Last Jedi as well.
All right. So now we'll go on to number 9s, right?
What's our cutoff? Do we want at least 3 people to say
Something like that,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go on to number 9s. James, what is your number 9?
I had Attack of the Clones.
Charles, what is your number 9?
Phantom Menace.
Okay, Dylan, what's your number 9?
My number 9 is also Phantom Menace.
Okay, my number 9 is Attack of the Clones. And Kerri, what is your number 9?
My number 9 is Phantom Menace.
Ooh,
So it looks like
we could talk about both of those.
That's what I was about to say. We can talk about Phantom and Attack. Let's just talk about them as Phantom and Attack, because that's how they were released.
Attack of the Phantom.
Attack of the Phantom, yes. So I don't know. Someone talk about Phantom Menace. Someone start.
I can start us off
Okay.
here. I think Phantom Menace is a fun movie. I think John Williams saved this movie from being one of the worst movies ever made Like that score from John Williams, like it does not need to go that hard at all. At all. Like John Williams is composing that like he's like a newcomer and he's trying to like impress everybody, and it's just like, John Williams, you've been working for like 45 years. You do not need to do this. Take a breath, please. He's incredible. I The frustrating thing about this movie is that in order to look at it positively, you have to like look at things that aren't there. You have to make conspiracy theories about Jar Jar Binks. Like you gotta constantly make excuses to make this movie work. And I think it's okay because it's a fun movie. It's fun to watch. Like there are scenes in that movie that make me laugh. There are moments that are just fun. But in general, it starts a kind of a troubling term, like a trend for me, where it doesn't allow any nuance to discuss about the Jedi Order. Like, hey, this is the Jedi Order. We're gonna go to war to save three friends that are in this like arena for spying and like invading another territory, but we're not going to go to war to end slavery. Like that's a hard stop for us. We're gonna go to war to negotiate trade agreements, but we're not going to go to war to defend like to get rid of slavery. It's a no for us, dog. Like it's just how can someone watch this movie with Qui-Gon Jinn gambling basically and lying to free one slave, and then he just like dips out on the planet. They go back and the Jedi Order is just like, oh my gosh, this boy was a slave. That sounds horrible. And then it's just like the Jedi Order just keeps going, moving on. Like what? Like at what point? Like do we like hold the Jedi accountable for this? This is ridiculous. And so for me, when I think of the Phantom Menace, I think it's just like the only way, at least for me, that I can watch it is like, man, these Jedi are awful, like terrible people, and they're acting like they're the best thing in the world. And so for me, Phantom Menace kind of starts that worrying trend of not allowing for any nuance or discussion of the actual world, its cultures and the different worlds. And it rather would like us to think that these people that are negotiating trade agreements and are like the evil people and not the people on that like desert planet that have slaves. Just don't worry about that. Anakin will just kill them all like in like a movie, and then he'll be the villain. So it's just weird.
Yeah, I just want to throw out there, John Williams definitely can make a movie, just elevate a movie, even if it's already great or even if it's bad. Like look at Home Alone, for example. Like, you know, that movie's great, but it's not as great if it doesn't have that score. But yeah, so Dylan, what do you think about The Phantom Menace?
Yeah, it's my number 9. It's my least favorite of the Skywalker saga, but I do put it above the two like spin-offs that I already mentioned in my 11 and 12, 10, just because it is part of that saga. Like it is part of that overarching story that I do love. I like the overall story, even if some bits of it are weaker than others. I do really enjoy moments of this a lot. Duel of the Fates, the lightsaber fight is awesome. I like the pod racing scene. I do find the everything else a little bit of a chore. In the, you know, it's a lot of just talkings and discussions on politics and stuff, and that's like interesting, but it's also like for every minute of exciting action, there's like 3 minutes of that stuff, and then it's just like I'm waiting to get to the next great set piece. And a Star Wars movie should not be all about its action or its set pieces. It shouldn't be, but when those are the only great parts of it, every time I'm watching it, I'm waiting for it to get to that next great moment. Whereas some other movies on this list like have those more, you know, talky dialogue driven moments, but they actually mean something more than just spewing facts about the council and the Senate and the Jedis and all that, you know. So yeah, I think it's interesting. I think the Yoda design here, I get they were trying to go for like the puppet, that it looks horrendous. I'm glad they went full CGI with the prequels in the later films for Yoda. And then, you know, they cycled back around to the original puppet stuff in Last Jedi, but like I don't know what they were doing with Yoda in this film. He looks really weird and creepy. But yeah, I don't know if they fixed that on Disney Plus either. But I remember just growing up being like, Yoda's freaky. He's freaking me out. But yeah, like introduction of great talent and great performers, I think elevates this a little bit too. Like Ewan McGregor, great casting choice as Obi-Wan. He's amazing. I love Liam Neeson as Qui-Gon, even though you know Qui-Gon is a little bit more stale than others would say. I think he's a little staler. Jake Lloyd, not great in the role of Anakin, but at least he has like a fun energy to him where it's like, he's having fun. He's a little kid on set, obviously not directed well, but I'm like, oh, good for him, especially seeing how tragically his life ended up. I'm like, oh, well, poor guy. At least he had this before the audience saw this, of course, and then they started hating on him. But yeah,
Star Wars fans are great.
I like bits and moments of this, but I think the overall is staler in comparison to the other 8 Skywalker Saga films for me in terms of just overall.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think, that goes to show like the kind of like toxic nature that fandom can actually have. Like the worst parts of it is what happened to like somebody like Jake Lloyd. And I just think it's very, very terrible that just because you
Ahmed
didn't
Best
like,
too, as Jar Jar got a lot of hate too. So
yeah, that too. Yes, absolutely. Although, still, Jake Lloyd, you can at least attribute his face to it. You can't even see the other guy, so he can at least probably walk around. But either way, I'm sure both got a lot of hate. It's just very terrible. And then you have like Leslie Jones and Ghostbusters, and even John Boyega and the girl who played Rose, woman who played Rose. Sorry. But yeah, that aside, I don't actually mind Jake Lloyd in the movies. I think he's pretty fun, and I think this movie is fun. I agree. I think that's one of its strengths is that it has a lot of moments in it that you can watch. Like the pod racing scene is really fun. It's a really great action sequence. I think especially if you're a kid, you can watch these and you will definitely get bored with a lot of the the trade talk. And so it didn't even go full kid. Like they were like, we're going to make it really great for kids except for all these boring parts that people might want to skip over. But at least you have like the the Jedi's fighting, and you're trying to have like kind of like camaraderie between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan and stuff. And it's really cool to have like a young Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan. That's really fun. There's a lot of fun stuff, but I totally agree with Charles as well here, because I hate Yoda in this movie. I hate a lot of the Jedi, but especially Yoda, because like I understand like where George Lucas was going with like the story, where it's like, oh, well, this is why they refuse to train him is because he's fear, but it's like he's a little kid. Like you can't just like shit on a little kid and say, hey, you're a scared little kid. You're gonna end up a Sith because you're scared little. This doesn't make any sense. And I'm just like, it makes me hate Yoda, and people act like he's like one of the greatest teachers ever. And I'm like, he might be in the original movies, but I think this kind of detracts from him as a character overall. Or maybe it just makes him more complex. I don't know. I just don't like him in these, and I don't like the Jedi as well. That's a really great point that Charles had, I thought. But yeah, they are fun. There's a lot of really, really cool scenes like the lightsaber stuff. Some people say this is probably one of the greatest lightsaber battles. It's at the end of Phantom Menace. And people wanted more Darth Maul. And they tried to throw more Darth Maul in one of the movies we'll talk about later. It's fun, but there's barely a story. And when they're trying to do story. It's just a lot of like stuff people don't really care about or want to see. And it's just, I don't know. I think it wastes a lot of time with that. And it's just one of the most hated. And I don't super love it, but it's watchable, I think.
Chad, along that note of the Yoda thing, though, it made me think like the whole idea of, oh, there's darkness in him, I can see it. Like that's in itself an interesting idea. Like you think about like a movie like We Need to Talk About Kevin. It's all about how there's this kid, and it's like there's something with him that's like they can sense there's a darkness to him. And
he's Ezra Miller,
yeah. Well, yeah, I mean method. No, but it's like it's the idea of like, no, there's like something in that kid that like isn't right. Like we see in a lot of horror movies too. It's like there's that dark kid. I think the difference between that movie and this though is that the audience doesn't see that. Like they don't give us any inkling to Anakin in this movie that he is going to grow up to be Darth Vader. He is just a wide-eyed happy kid in this. We don't get that darkness till Attack of the Clones a little bit, and then of course Revenge of the Sith. Whereas I think if they gave a little bit of an edge to Anakin here, it would make it more justified when Yoda's like, I sense a darkness in that kid, and then like the audience could see it too and be like, oh yeah, that's gonna be Darth Vader. But now it's like, this kid Darth Vader, okay, and like yes, people can grow into evil or whatever. Also, like I think it would have been more interesting if we also saw what Yoda saw. Then it would be a little bit more justified. Because I agree with you. Like Yoda comes across as more of like a, like a negative Nancy, because it's like, let him just be a kid. What do you mean you see this darkness and evil in him? And it's like, because we aren't seeing it, because they're making him seem like this delightful little kid. Like,
Yeah.
it's not like that we need to talk about Kevin, where we, the audience, are also seeing this kid have this darker, tormented nature, and then we can understand why he grows up to then do the things he does.
Yeah.
So I agree with
Yeah.
that.
No, I definitely, that's a great point, because like, I understand the need to want that big arc where he goes from this to that.
Mhm.
And then you're like, holy shit, he was this little sweet kid. But I think exactly, you have a great point. That is a problem with execution. And if they would have executed a lot better, it could have made the Jedi seem like a little problematic, but not in such a way where you hate them and you can kind of still understand them, but then have like a differing side. Exactly what Charles has been saying about like the Jedi. They're not perfect. They make mistakes. They are sometimes can be jerks, but then sometimes they can do great things. So I think if you show the both sides to both sides, it could be actually pretty interesting. But Kerri, what do you feel about Phantom Menace?
Okay. Yeah, I agree with a lot of what's been said. This one, it's not my least favorite. I put it at number 9. Even of the prequels, it's not my least favorite. I think there are still some enjoyable moments here. Like, I think some of the acting is really good. Like, I love Natalie Portman. I love like the reveal, like Keira Knightley. You think she's
that's a great reveal.
Yeah, you think she's her for not a lot of the movie, but the first part of it. And I think that's a pretty cool reveal. I love Ewan McGregor. Liam Neeson does a great job. And yeah, there's some cool scenes like the pod racing stuff, but then this definitely ranks lower because there's definitely some scenes that are just difficult to watch. Like most of the Jar Jar Binks scenes are difficult to watch.
And the racism.
Yeah, that's a big
all right, we're banning Dylan's like.
Yeah, to me, like, this is, one that I just really don't look forward to watching in a rewatch.
Yeah. Great points. James, how do you feel about Phantom Menace?
This one, I agree with like when we say like it's kind of a fun movie to watch, because this came out when I was probably 10 or 11. So this is one of those where like the whole spectacle of everything was just kind of cool to me. And then on the rewatch, I was like, oh, maybe not as great. Like they introduced the whole concept of like midichlorians, and then we get like nothing else on that afterwards. Like this kid's got midichlorians off the chart kind of deal, but that's all we really get to hear about this. We don't know how it affects like other people or who's got certain levels of what. So just kind of they kind of leave it at that, and we're expected to just go off of whatever they say. I like, again, like I said with Star Wars, the ship design's cool. I like the Naboo starfighters. The droid fighters are pretty cool. I like the like main ships are really cool. The fighter craft is really cool. So it had that going for it, but it wasn't much else. The pod racing was pretty awesome too, but it still ranks pretty low for me.
Yeah, I think Star Wars being the fantasy set in space is the strength of it, and trying to add more sciencey, more hardcore sci-fi, I think really hurt it a little bit too, because people are like, midichlorians, ew, what? This is like a religion, like a fantastical, magical kind of thing, like a force and stuff. But yeah, all right, so let's talk about Attack of the Clones. Dylan, would you like to start Attack of the Clones?
Sure. Yeah, highest of everyone. I have it at 8.
Okay,
that's my 8. I like this one. Again, John Williams elevates it. I love that score of the Padme Anakin theme. I think it's gorgeous. I think I just like this a little bit more because it does try to, like, kind of what I was saying, like kind of go a little bit further into exploring some of the darkness of Anakin with his mother, and then of course with Padme and the idea that Jedi can't love. And I like the rebellious nature of Anakin. I like that dynamic kind of playing out. It's kind of what I wish I could have seen in Phantom Menace. Just like give us a little inkling that this guy's going to end up being Darth Vader. Yeah, I think we get a little more of Natalie Portman. That's why I like this more too. She's one of my favorite actresses. Again, this one is flawed. I don't like it as much. I think the visuals are kind of crappy. This is kind of that example as I was talking about earlier of like you can see the evolution of technology as you watch these movies, and this was kind of like the downward peak, the valley, if you will. But I still think there's a merit and charm in that, but also it doesn't make for a very good looking movie. But I like the world building. I love the different planets they go on this one. I like the kind of big gladiator-esque arena at the end. Like I do really like the Count Dooku stuff with Yoda at the end as well. Again, it has just more moments than Phantom Menace does for me, even though I think the flaws are still more or less the same.
Great points. Yeah, and I actually piggybacking off of that. I think it's the reverse for me, and that's why I think I had them flipped because these movies are like the Phantom and Attack of the Clones are kind of interchangeable for me a little bit, but I feel like Attack of the Clones for me is just a little bit more forgettable. But I think I've seen them way less than Dylan probably has. So for me, I'm just like trying to remember, like, is there anything about Attack of the Clones that I remember and I like? And I just don't really think that there is, but it doesn't like piss me off like Rise of Skywalker does. So I think that's where my formulation is. And, we'll get to Solo later. That's a whole other thing. But Attack of the Clones, yeah, it's just forgettable. It doesn't have the little kid Anakin that I thought was like really sweet and fun. But I love Hayden Christensen, and we'll get to my thoughts on Revenge of the Sith because I like that one considerably more than I do the first two in the franchise, or the trilogy. But I think that this one just doesn't have the highs of the Revenge of the Sith, and I just don't think it has the fun that Phantom does. But maybe I need to watch this one more. I don't know. A lot of people seem to not like this one either, so probably not. Kerri, what do you think about Attack of the Clones?
I really agree with what you said because this is my least favorite of the entire Star Wars franchise. That I think Phantom Menace is above for me because it's a little bit more fun, and Revenge of the Sith is above for me because I think it contains some of the same faults as Attack of the Clones, but at least it has more enjoyable parts. Attack of the Clones, honestly, the interactions and the dialogue between Anakin and Padme like makes this movie almost unwatchable for me. Like I think it's just so bad, and I'm like, how did this I guess because they just gave George Lucas like free reign, but I'm just like, how did this get like who let this get to theaters like this? And there's just not, compared to the other movies, there's just not enough other parts I can look to in this movie for enjoyment. Like there's not much for me that redeems any of the faults it has.
Yeah, and I think the Anakin Padme stuff bleeds into Revenge of the Sith,
Yes.
but I think the highs of that movie for me just work so much that I care about that less.
Yes.
Or actually it strengthens that relationship a little bit more for me to where like a little bit of the dialogue doesn't bug me as much as this whatever movie as Attack of the Clones. James, what do you think about Attack of the Clones?
So this one, I like this one. Again, mostly the memorable scene is like the gladiator style fight bleeds into the whole open field kind of fight at the end, which I kind of liked. I thought was pretty cool. You get some pretty cringy dialogue between Padme and Anakin. There's not much else I think that's going for it, and I think this one kind of falls victim to the whole mid 2000s CGI issue. I know the first one. Some of those scenes from the first one from Phantom Menace just do not hold up. When I rewatched it, I was like, wow, that actually looks pretty bad, like CG. This one was marginally better, I guess. I liked the introduction of Jango Fett and young Boba, and Slave One was kind of cool. But this one doesn't have that much going for it, to be honest. Although, again, we do get Christopher Lee as Count Dooku, so that's always pretty awesome. I did like that a lot.
Absolutely. Charles, what do you think about Attack of the Clones?
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement, and especially with Kerri, there is a world where I have this at the bottom. If Rise of Skywalker wasn't as Rise of Skywalker as it is, Attack of the Clones, I feel like is one of those moments where you get a glimpse into the person that's running everything, and you realize that they have no clue what they're doing. George Lucas, this is his his fingerprints are all over this movie, and it's all bad. Almost every single decision George Lucas makes in this movie is horrible. And it's one of those things where it's just like, it constantly makes me question, how did you even like make these other movies if your idea of incredible scenes are people walking down corridors, which Red Letter Media like tore them apart for that. The dialogue, if we remove Star Wars from it, this script is one of the worst written ever. It's horrible. And like, don't even like, I kind of talked about like the Jedi Order, like going to war to save 3 friends instead of going to war to, I don't know, end slavery. Like it just doesn't even, like, the decision making at the highest level, the plot doesn't really make a lot of sense. And in my opinion, the only way you can view it is that Jedi are selfish and only act when it's in the interest of them, or when they only act when like one of their other Jedi, like Dooku, goes rogue and starts challenging the status quo. Then they're like, oh no, we can't want to have one of our guys going out and doing all that progressive nonsense. We got to take him out. And so for me, Attack of the Clones is just a failure across the board. Nothing really works in it. There are fun moments in it, but the fun moments aren't really enough for me, because you have to watch about 2.5 hours until you get to the fun moments. I think the one rescue of this is the Obi-Wan Secret Army storyline is really interesting. With a better director, I don't know, like maybe can't remember his name that does Rogue One. If he did that storyline, that could have been a really amazing, really interesting movie. There is a good movie that's in this, but it's not Attack of the Clones.
Yeah, and to answer your question, I think it's because the original trilogy had like a lot more creatives, like different directors and writers to help with the
I've heard the editing. Saved the original trilogy.
Yeah,
absolutely.
George,
George just kind of had more control in this one, which, you know, some people who to go like, hey, maybe don't add those racist caricatures in your movies and a bunch of stuff about trading. So let's get on to our next. What are we at? 8. We're at 8 now, and so that's.
I already said mine.
8. So Charles, what is your 8?
Rogue One.
And Dillinger's was what?
Attack of the Clones.
Okay, my 8 is Phantom Menace. Kerri, what is your 8?
My 8 is Revenge of the Sith.
Okay.
Save that for later. Okay.
Same.
Yep. James, what is your 8?
Mine was Phantom Menace.
All right. So we're gonna get to 7. And we're gonna start with Dylan. Dylan, what's your 7?
7, I said earlier, Rise of Skywalker.
Okay, my 7 is Rogue One. Kerri, what is your 7?
My 7 is also Rise of Skywalker.
Okay. I'm sorry. James. What are we at? James, what is your number 7?
I put Solo.
Okay. Charles, what is your number 7?
Force Awakens.
Okay.
Save it for later.
Yeah, that's definitely save it for later for me.
Save it for later.
Okay. So do we come to a consensus? Are we moving on to 6s? 6s.
Everything's wait for it.
All right.
Man, this is.
All right. So
I like this though. I like how diverse it is already.
Yeah.
I really like that. Okay.
I'll go ahead and give my 6. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and do it. I'm calling an audible here, and I'm changing something up. This is definitely gonna be a wait for it. My 6 is The Empire Strikes Back.
Wait for it, sir.
Wait for it.
I knew that. I said
I'm interested.
Well, the only way it wouldn't be a wait for it is if we all had it at 6. So.
Yeah.
Good point. Very good point. Yeah.
My 6 is The Last Jedi. James.
Mine was Revenge of the Sith.
Mine is Return of the Jedi.
We'll wait for it there. And my number 6 is also The Last Jedi.
Okay.
And that's a wait for me. For me as well.
All right. So we're at 6. So we're nearly in the top 5 now. So do we have some sort of like consensus?
Everything is wait for it. So maybe we'll all say our 5 and see what's kind of lowest.
All right, Kerri, what is your 5?
My number 5 is The Force Awakens.
Okay, James, what is your 5?
Also, The Force Awakens.
All right, Charles, what is your 5?
Solo.
And Dylan, what is your 5?
Also, The Force Awakens.
Okay, my 5 is Return of the Jedi.
Okay, so we can definitely do Solo and The Force Awakens.
Cool. Very different movies.
Yes.
Solo and The Force Awakens. All right, let's start with Solo. A lot of us had that ranked lower. But yeah, let's start with no, I'll start on this one. Solo, I think, is a very unnecessary movie. I understand that they wanted to just, Disney owns it. They just want to throw out more and more Star Wars, and now they're doing the TV thing where they're like, we're going to cover all the bases in the TV realm now. And I hear Andor's great, and I got to check it out. But with Solo, they're like, well, let's do the long-awaited that we've been trying to make, I think, Han Solo standalone movie where we learn more about this character, and then it's almost like, do we need to know more about that character? Don't we get like a lot of the greatest stuff already in the other movies with him? And then, you get like an actor in there who's fine, but he's also kind of like the same age that Harrison Ford was when he started. So it's just weird. And it's like, that's not Han Solo. That's some guy pretending to be Han Solo this whole movie. And it's like he's the lead of it. So it's very distracting. And, Daenerys is in this and it's cool, but it's not like really that interesting. And I don't know. I just didn't like any of the characters. I didn't care about Woody Harrelson in the movie, or, a lot of it was just shot really dark and just like it just kind of loses a lot of the, I think, bright, fun Star Wars, and this is just trying to be that, like, some of the lines and stuff, like he's trying to be that, ne'er-do-well, Han Solo or whatever, and he does a decent job, but I think most of this movie is just pretty forgettable. I do like Donald Glover, but I still even think he's trying to pretend to be something. He's not like actually the embodiment of like the young uh, Calrissian Lando. And so it just feels like he's trying to do an impression of the guy who played Lando again. And yeah, I don't know. I don't want to be so negative on it. I just think it's kind of a whatever movie, and I don't enjoy it. So, yep, that's it. Kerri, Solo.
Yeah, I that's honestly really what I have as well. For me, this one just isn't memorable. There's just not a lot there to like latch onto. I think a big problem with this is just the guy they cast as Han Solo in this movie. I don't think is really charismatic enough to pull it off, or at least it's just not the role for him. Like, I don't know, it's hard to see anyone, because we already have a young Harrison Ford in the original trilogy. I mean, I know this is supposed to be, even younger, but Harrison Ford is just so much better at this role that it really just, to have a Solo movie, and, I think Solo is just not, the guy who's playing Solo isn't just as suited, or just no one can live up to Harrison Ford. Maybe that's the problem. But otherwise, even some of the prequels were just above this movie for me, because at least they had some enjoyable scenes, and I think they had some better acting.
Yeah, and thank God they didn't try to like de-age Harrison Ford for this.
That would have been even worse.
But that doesn't mean I like this.
Like Indiana Jones, they're doing it in the new one.
Oh no,
he looks really plasticky.
Yeah,
At least
I'm excited.
It looks so good.
At least when they did it in like Captain Marvel, he wasn't the Samuel L. Jackson wasn't the star.
Yeah.
See, so
right, yeah.
it was fine. But
at least they're all still alive. At least they're not doing what they did in Rogue One.
Oh
Take
my
a
God,
dead person
dude.
and making
Yeah,
them.
That's rough. Don't have them talk. Anyways, James, how do you feel about Solo?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I was again entertained by it. Not that that kind of says much for some of these movies. Like the train heist scene was pretty cool. I didn't mind the casting for it. Like I definitely liked Donald Glover and Amelia Clark was cool, but this just didn't have too much else going for it for me. So that's just why it ranked lower for me. I kind of agree with what you and Kerri have said on this one. There's not a whole lot to it, so it was just lower for me.
All right, and Charles, you ranked this the highest, I think. What do you like Solo?
Yeah, so to be fair, I just watched this movie for the first time yesterday, and I avoided it for the longest
Ooh.
time because the Star Wars community is not super positive about the movie, and it didn't do well in the box office, and I thought it was going to be pretty forgettable. But the thing that I loved the most about it was really fun, and it felt like it was actually doing what Rogue One wanted to do, but better. I cared about the characters. I understood why they were doing everything they wanted to do. I understood why this was worth dying for. I understood why this was worth betraying someone for. I also understood the entirety of all of those little plans, those heists that they did, the way they executed it visually through editing as well. It's actually like that train heist. I think it's probably the best heist sequence we've had in a few years. Because if you think about it, like just go back and watch it after this and notice how you understand where everybody is at all times, what they're doing. You understand the stakes. You understand this person's role. You understand when this person gets hurt and it kind of goes things haywire. Like you understand what everyone has to do. And when you watch Rogue One, that final end sequence is there's a few people inside, they're pressing buttons, and there's like a hallway shootout, and then there's a lot of people outside fighting people. I just like I in the it's just not really an interesting story for me in an interesting setup or structure. And then there are people fighting in space. But in that train heist, everyone has a role, everyone has to execute it, and when the first person fails, everything goes haywire. And it reminds me honestly of like the classic Mission Impossible first movie. How like all it takes is one mistake and things go wrong. And I love how that whole movie actually spent all of the time in that world, and it didn't bring in unnecessary Jedi nonsense. Okay, it did bring in Darth Maul, but if you understand Darth Maul and who he is from the Clone Wars, his like inclusion in it makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
And so for me, when I think of Solo, I agree with Kerri. Like Han Solo is the worst part of it. He's fine. He's fine. But there are so many great character moments that weren't present for me in Rogue One. L3 being the Millennium Falcon sounds silly, but in execution it works for me. And now I find myself thinking, oh, when I go back and rewatch Return of the Jedi and Lando is like stroking Falcon, I want to be like, oh, now I know why. Now I understand. And the Chewbacca Han relationship, I think it works for me. It fleshes out Chewbacca to a degree that none of the other Star Wars movies do. And I found a lot of the secondary characters really interesting. And so for me, Solo represents a possible future the franchise could have gone down. Really fun, self-contained, just fun adventures. And like kind of relatively low stakes, but fun characters. And then they just cut that off because it just didn't do well. And it wasn't necessarily the story people wanted to see. But for me, I had a lot of fun. And I kind of wish we had more movies like it.
Yeah, I like that idea of like fun side adventures. I just wish it wouldn't focus on a character we already know. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's-
I was just
Dylan.
about to say that. Yeah, I was just about to say like
Go ahead.
I think the idea of doing a separate story is fine. It's just when your stakes are, when it's Han Solo, it's like that's such a precious character. It's like, yeah, when I think of these movies, I think about like if Solo didn't exist, would it change my outlook on the rest of the movies? Not that much. Like that moment
Good
you
point.
talked about, Charles, with the Lando thing, like that's great and all, but like for me, it wouldn't change anything for me. Like, and I think that's why this is kind of at the bottom of my ranking, because you get rid of it, it doesn't do anything to me. It doesn't tarnish anything else. It doesn't improve anything else existing, and it does the thing I hate most in origin prequels or whatever, where like they have to give the character a name and they find the most half-assed way of doing it. Like
The Han
you're
Solo naming one was awful.
You're
I'll
by
give you
yourself.
that.
You're by yourself. Oh, so you would say you are Solo? Okay, that's gonna be your
I
name.
couldn't
It's like,
believe that.
What? Yeah, no, that is the most egregious thing. Yeah, that'd be like if Harry Potter didn't have a last name and he walks into like this pottery barn and they're like, well, I guess your name's gonna be Harry Potter. He was like, yeah, like
It's like Kaiser Soze.
Yes, exactly. I just find that trope to be so stupid, but again, like there are fun moments. I think it's well shot, choreographed, all that stuff. I do love Chewie, so like just him being there makes me happy. But again, like I still like him in the other movies enough where I'm not like deprived of Chewie that I needed more of him. It's just more like, oh, it's a great extra little bonus.
Mhm.
I just don't understand why in any universe, and maybe the script was that bad, or maybe the differences were that bad, but like why you would ever take a film away from Lord and Miller just never made sense to me. Like,
Yeah.
like literally, like the Lego Movie, one of the greatest animated films of the last 10 years. Like, what they did with Spider Verse was amazing. Like, I just don't understand how Ron Howard is a better choice than them. Yes, maybe for what the studio was going for, maybe, but like, I just never find Ron Howard's work to be nearly as captivating as the stuff I've seen from Lord and Miller so far. 21 Jump Street, another example. Like I would have loved to see their version, the originally intended version. I know it's creative differences, but like I don't see a world where this is the better version than whatever they would have made. That being said, like it's not terrible. It's still Star Wars, so I still like it, but it's it seems the most unnecessary for me.
All right. Yeah. So I think we're talking about Force Awakens now. All right, Kerri, do you want to start with Force Awakens?
Sure, I'll start with that one. This one for me, number 5. I think it was just an amazing start to the new trilogy. Like it introduced us to so many characters that I wound up loving. I love Rey. I love oh my god, now I'm forgetting everyone's
Finn?
name. I love Finn.
Poe?
I love Poe.
Kylo?
I don't love Kylo. Kylo would be my. I mean,
BB-8.
entry. He's
BB-8.
interesting. Oh, BB-8. Oh my gosh. I love
Space.
Space. The garbage.
But I think this one is. I think it is like one of the best crafted
Garbage.
Star Wars movies. Like
Yeah.
the plot structure, the beginning, middle, and end. Like how it ends so epically. Like that battle between Kylo and Rey in the snow in the forest. That is so. I know people have problems with like, well, how does she pick up a lightsaber and just like know how to use it?
Screw those
I
people,
think
by
it's
the
like
way.
beautiful.
Same thing Luke did it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's beautifully shot. Like, this for me, I would say the reason it's maybe my number 5 is because as compared to the original trilogy, I think just as a trilogy is kind of what makes it a little bit lower for me because they ultimately, for me, don't pull off the promise of that first movie.
Mhm.
But I do think it is just one of the most enjoyable Star Wars films. I love watching this one.
Absolutely. All right, James, what do you think about this one?
So I was super excited for this one, and like I still was when I watched it, but it returned to what the first 6 movies were like kind of quick for me. Like the whole like we'll have Kylo Ren complete his training. Like there was 3 movies of Anakin, there was 3 movies of Luke, there's 6 movies if you watch each character's development through it. There's already 6 movies of let's complete their training. You must fulfill your destiny. This, and that. Like that kind of had me rolling my eyes pretty fast. I mean, obviously, you have Kylo Ren is still like struggling between like light and dark. I think there's still lightness in me. Like, can you show me the rest of the way? And I love the introduction of Supreme Leader Snoke, which was part of why I didn't like the Last Jedi so much because they took this new kind of character, new super bad villain, and they literally cut him in half. So I was like, well, there goes that. I guess we don't get to learn more about him at all. So again, we'll just take that for what it is, and we can just all go hang for it. I mean, Star Killer Base was cool, but I was like, all right, so this is just an even bigger Death Star. Now it can destroy 5 planets at once once it's done sucking the sun out of whatever. So that was like, it was cool in concept, but it's kind of the same. It's just a similar theme, the similar-ish vibe. So for me, it kind of like fell off pretty quick. I think the whole like nostalgia factor made me like this more because this is like, again, it's new Star Wars. I liked all the new characters too. I thought Finn was cool, Poe was cool, Rey was cool. I liked all the introduction of this. It gets points because it kind of started the new trilogy, but to me it just kind of fell back into what the other 6 movies were. So it kind of fell off pretty quick for me. But again, for it to be released in 2015, like there's, CGI is going to look way better than, Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. Revenge of the Sith looked pretty good, but then I was excited to see Star Wars with kind of like updated, current CGI capabilities, which I liked a lot. Again, they got the ship design right. All the X-wings were pretty cool. I liked all that stuff a whole lot, but it just fell back to what the other 6 movies were and got worse in the sequels. So this one did rank pretty high, but I didn't like it all that much after the fact, really, especially watching it a second time.
All right. Yep. Charles, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I had it at down at number 7. And this is when we start getting into like movies that like I just, even if it's lower or higher than everybody else's, I just think it's just good movie. I think Force Awakens is a great movie. I really agree with what Kerri shared, especially the structure, the script, everything's really tight in this movie. Everything that is mentioned pays off later. Everything has a role. Every character has a beat or a moment, and everything comes together really solidly. The only flaw I can really point to it is, well, I guess only 2 flaws is Rise of Skywalker makes the movie significantly worse on rewatch, because Force Awakens makes so many promises and set so many paths on a really, or so many characters on a really interesting path forward. And so it's really frustrating sometimes to watch Force Awakens and not get the payoff, at least I wanted, from each of those characters. And it also, the other flaw is it's A New Hope. Now, this is a slight hot take, but I do think it improves on The New Hope in a significant amount of categories. Force Awakens is basically A New Hope with a worse story, I think, slightly. Not like when I think of it in terms of like, are the beats are interesting? No, the beats are interesting. It's just the same beats as A New Hope, but it has better characters easier to root for. It has significantly better acting and highly, highly, highly like more effective dialogue. The dialogue in Force Awakens is just leagues and beyond better than A New Hope. There are still moments I watch A New Hope and I'm like, what are you even saying? Like, I don't understand. Who are you? Like, what? Why are you here? Who is that guy that just got choked? Oh, okay, I get. Well, let's just move on. It's just like Force Awakens takes all of those elements and improves on it, and it sets such a bright future, and it sets the story into a direction where it can investigate the past of the Jedi Order. Wait, Luke tried to start a Jedi Order and it failed again? Whoa, like why did the Jedi fail again? That's like so weird. That's like now like the 10th time the Jedi Order has failed. That's so weird. Let's find out why. And it starts that story. It gives the Jedi Order and the Sith Order an element of magic that eventually would be deconstructed in the next movie, to my joy. But it at least starts the new trilogy in a direction where maybe finally we might investigate why all these Jedi keep having these great ideas and failing every time. So for me, Force Awakens is a great movie. I just like a few other movies a little bit better.
Sounds great. Dylan, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, everyone said what I wanted to say, in the fact that if I had been ranking these when Force Awakens come out, it's probably top 3. But I think because of the movies that came after, it kind of devalued some elements of this a little bit more, to where when you rewatch Force Awakens, you're like, oh wait, they never followed through on that. But that being said, I still think it's an amazing time. It was probably my favorite theater going experience of my life. I just remember the hype building up to it, being in the theater, all the cathartic moments. It's what people talk about Endgame being. That's how I felt for this movie. Endgame also had a lot of cheers and hoots and hollers, but this one just, it felt like it meant more, because it wasn't just a group of people who had been watching these characters for 10 years hooting and hollering. It was people who had been watching these for however many decades cheering. My dad was sitting next to me cheering. Like, it was so cool to see that vibe in the theater. Love the new characters. Every single one has just such a cool, unique personality. Yes, it does borrow a lot of story beats from New Hope, but it does them, like Charles said, like I think the writing is a little stronger in conveying some of those themes and tropes and stuff like that. And yeah, that Han Solo death moment just it sucks, but it's so well done, so well crafted, so well set up. yeah, it was just such an exciting movie when it came out. I think the years have not been as kind to it, but it's still great, and it's still in my top 5 for those reasons.
Great. Yeah. So for me, when people like look at my ranking, I think a lot of people would go like, Chad, I don't think you even Star Wars. I don't think you're Star Warsing right, because I know mine's like a lot different. I have this one still ranked very high, and I'm glad to hear Charles and Dylan say things like, maybe it seems like it's kind of like heresy a little bit, but to say that Force Awakens did something better than one of the best, most classic films of all time that changed the game and whatever. It's not outlandish to say I like this in Force Awakens more than I like this in Star Wars specific elements. And for me, I think I'm able to take, and this is why I like, stuff like Halloween Ends so much, is because sometimes I'm able to actually take a movie and look at it as its own thing, and a lot of the times it not being delivered on, or it not being a satisfying deliverance of the rest of the trilogy, doesn't detract from it for me. So as a standalone film, I think for me, this is the best version of a Star Wars film that you can have. For me, I think it has more interesting characters than the original trilogy. I think it just has like some of the things you can think about that the original trilogy doesn't really have for me. And some of the moments are the best moments in all of Star Wars. Like Kerri said, that Winter Forest thing, with the lightsaber slowly shaking and then flying, and you think it's going to go to Kylo and it goes to Rey. That is the best moment ever in any Star Wars film for me. When I saw that again, rewatching it for this, I was like, oh my God, that's the best moment I've ever seen in any Star Wars film. I just love that so much. It's like, and exactly like Charles and everybody saying that, like, people like saying the whole Mary Sue thing and stuff. I just think it's so just detractive from that character. I think she's so great. Wasn't like paid off like the best later on, but it doesn't matter for me. I love the hope of what could have happened if it were a stronger trilogy, and I think this movie just nails all of that. A lot of the funny beats, like that's garbage. The garbage will do. Comedy like that is just hits still every time for me. Han Solo showing up with Chewie and we're home, and just like all these fantastic moments, the great story. I love her, doing the Jedi mind trick on the guards, and it's like, and leave the gun and stuff like that. I don't know. I find it more interesting than a lot of the stuff in the original trilogy.
You mean Daniel Craig?
Daniel Craig? Oh, that's right.
He plays that
stormtrooper.
Daniel
Craig. Yeah, and like, I don't know. It's just, I think it's because, like I said, like this is one of the things that I started with. And the thing with, so I was going back to watch the originals because this new one was coming out, and watching this new one, watching the lightsaber being this like terrifying like beam that if it touches you, you will get cut like severely, and you can feel that in the original Star Wars because the technology wasn't as good. Luke just picks it up. He starts waving it around like nonchalantly, like, what's this thing? And Obi-Wan doesn't even go, what the fuck are you doing? Put that down. You could hurt someone. You don't even know what this is. And he's just like nonchalantly, just like, whatever. And it's just like means nothing there for me. And I'm just like, okay. So
it's because the Jedi are passive. They're like, oh, he might kill someone, but he hasn't yet. I'm gonna hold back here.
So, anyways, yeah, that's I don't know. It just, a lot of the stuff just hit stronger for me, and I just really adore that film. And I had to rewatch it again just to get that hype back for me. Just saying, you know what? I love the Force Awakens still, and it hasn't detracted from me, even though I do think the trilogy could have been stronger overall. So yeah, wait, was that it? You started with Force Awakens, right? Okay, so now we're gonna move on to our threes or fours. Fours. All right. Who starts with 4? Me? I think it's 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. You.
Okay.
What's your 4?
My number 4 is Rogue One.
All right. James, what's your 4?
I put Return of the Jedi.
All right. Charles, 4.
A New Hope.
Dylan, 4.
Revenge of the Sith.
Okay. And my 4 is also Revenge of the Sith.
Okay. So there's quite a few we could talk about. I think we could do Rogue One first because quite a few people had that ranked a lot lower, and then Revenge of the Sith, and we could also do Return of the Jedi.
All right. Let's start with Rogue One. James, do you want to start with Rogue One?
Yeah, sure. I was actually quite surprised by this movie, and I liked how it ended more than I like how it began. I think to me it was kind of jumpy in the beginning. It kind of jumped from scene to like location kind of quick, but I liked how it kind of all came together. I definitely liked the end of it. I thought it was cool to see like a spin-off style story, but it's like in between when they steal the Death Star plans. So I liked this one just because it was like not like the original like Skywalker saga. So I was really interested to see like what they do with this, but to have it be like in the same like along the same storyline, I thought this was done really well. Yeah, I wasn't that cool with them like digitally recreating Tarkin, I think that was his name.
Yep.
And then like de-aging him a bit too, so he's not as old as he looked in the original. That one was a bit of a stretch for me. Like I get why they put that in there, but it wasn't my favorite thing. But I liked most other things about this movie. The final battle kind of saves it, to be honest. But I like the sense of like suspense that I got, even though like they're gonna get the plans away from the base because they have to find them in the fourth one. I liked the end of it. I thought this was really well done though, and I was surprised at how much I liked this one.
Hell yeah, dude. Charles, what do you think about Rogue One?
Now, to be fair, I haven't seen the new Andor series, and I've heard that like does everything that I'm about to criticize Rogue One for. It does all of that better. Rogue One does not have characters. They don't. And I mean, we could subscribe values, we could subscribe motivations or values or beliefs to the characters. They're there. Most of them are like thin, so we could like write something. Jin's doing this because her dad died, but we have to just completely assume based off of nothing because there aren't quiet moments. Like, for instance, a movie that got crapped on a lot more and did a lot worse has those quiet moments repeatedly throughout the movie where we understand. Solo, there's a big campfire discussion before the first heist. Then during the next movie, they have scenes where they're hanging out on the Falcon, talking to each other, challenging each other, pushing each other through dialogue. We're starting to learn more about the characters. Rogue One has no time for that. We're going from this planet to that planet. The father's dead. You're holding him. Now you're going to go do the rebellion. I have a lot of questions about who's running the rebellion in this. Why is Saw Gerrera choosing to just die after he spent like 20 to 25 years of his life getting out of these situations?
Get on the ship.
His entire identity is, dude, that guy should be dead. How is he not dead? And then he's now just like, man, that Death Star, that's bad. Like I don't know if I can outrun that, even though like I just made it through like a massacre of the Jedi in Order 66. It just makes no sense at all. And I feel like people that talk about like how much it services the lore and history just forget about that. Why are we trusting Jin, who is not a person or not a part of the rebellion, with the most important plans in the rebellion, that if this plan fails, the rebellion fails? Why are we trusting her? Why are we listening to her? Why is she saying anything in this meeting? Who is she? It just doesn't make any sense at all. Why is Cassian joining this person? I think it just in general started a really horrible precedent where it was more important to add in fan service than to add in a self-contained character-focused story. And for me, I would have loved to see this movie with maybe half as long of a final battle and more time spent on why are characters doing this. Why is, for instance, Donnie Yen's character obsessed with the Jedi? I guess he used to be a Jedi. I don't know. Like, why is that dude hanging out with him? Why do they join Jin? Why is the guy that is played by what's his name from the Night of? Why is
Riz
he?
Ahmed.
Yeah, Riz Ahmed. Why is he there? Why is he joining? I just, it's really frustrating when I see the end. Like, I'm seeing characters for the first time in one movie, and then I see them die, and I just don't feel sorry for any of them. I don't feel sad about it. I'm just like, well, okay, I guess that's pretty sad. I also question if the Darth Vader like massacre scene was not in that movie, if people would have loved it. I would have loved to see that movie released without that Darth Vader
Great
scene
point.
at the end. Would people still love this movie? I feel like they wouldn't. So I don't know. For me, I'm being really hard on Rogue One. I've heard this is fixed in Andor, but like for like a movie that is supposed to be a Star Wars movie, it fails in a lot of regards for me.
Yeah, you shouldn't need a show to fix your movie. Phenomenal points, Charles. Dylan, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, I'm not as upset about those elements, but I do still agree about those elements that Charles mentioned. Like, I just find this one kind of like Solo. Like, if you don't have this movie, the Star Wars saga still exists as its own. Like, this doesn't add much to me to that story. Like, it's fun to watch this right into A New Hope to see the the series of events play out, but like this doesn't necessarily improve or take away from the originals. It just kind of is an added little thing, added bonus. I still really like the action in this though. Like that Darth Vader scene is still really cool, even if it's not, even if it is the movie, and the enjoyment for me, like it is because it is so good. Like I love the idea of him being
It's
like this
great.
in the shadows, kind of come out with the lightsaber. Oh, it's so good. But like, yeah, I agree. Like the characters, they aren't distinct enough for me to like truly care about them enough. I do like the performances, but again, like the characters, we just haven't spent enough time with them to really get why we should care about all of them. The one we care about the most is probably K2SO, and he's a droid.
Yeah.
And it's a
Yeah.
great performance, obviously, Alan Tudyk. But again, even then, like I feel like at the end, I'm left a little cold here. Maybe that's the intention, but at the same time, like I don't know. This one's always been kind of just meh to me, and I feel like everyone like I think this is a pretty hot take that like I have it this low. Like I think a lot of people really love this movie, and I
Yeah.
think I just never really saw it. But hey, I appreciate those who do like it. I wish I liked it as much. I think the third act is the strongest act. I think the first two drag for me on rewatch. Like Felicity Jones, but I think she's been so much better in that Ruth Bader Ginsburg movie and in The Theory of Everything. I think this is one of her weaker performances, but I still like her, so I enjoy it. But it's not my favorite.
I'm glad you mentioned the performance because the actors are significantly better than the performances they put in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I really agree. And I think in Jin Erso, her character, if we had to figure out who her character is, I would struggle to come up with any traits for her character other than she doesn't show emotion and she's cold. That
And
has
like
got
the-
to be that has got to be a bummer for a big actor to play. Like, you're cold, you don't care. Action. It's got to be horrible.
Yeah, I kind of I wish like I had been Charles the day that I had to debate why Revenge of the Sith is better than Rogue One, because it is. But I didn't. I wasn't as because Charles delivered brilliantly on why Rogue One could have been so much better, and it just like if you actually look at like the story elements, the characters themselves, and just like why we should care about them and stuff, it's just all very weak. Like if you push it, it'll collapse like dominoes. And you have some moments littered throughout of the movie that will give you that big jolt of, oh my God, yeah, and make you think that you like the movie more than you actually should. I think that may be harsh. People like what they like, but I think, like Charles said, if that scene wasn't in there, people wouldn't like it as much as they do. And I think they like that scene and they don't necessarily love the movie. They're probably bored just like we are for a lot of it until they get to those parts that they love. For me, just like Solo, this one is kind of, just like what Dylan said, is unnecessary. It was kind of an interesting, like, oh, here's a plot hole from the original film. Let's fill that in with this movie. And then it's like, okay, they did that, but in doing that, they also, it's unnecessary. You don't really need it. It's like, a movie to fill a plot hole. And once it's done, well, now we need these characters to die. So they're just going to sit there and like link hands and just like, we're going to die now. And it's like, why aren't you trying to save yourself? Like, you just, okay, I guess you just give up. That's your whole character thing, is you just give up, and just like Saw did. And it's, I don't know. It's just, there's really not many moments, I think, either, that just make me actually want to return to it either. There's some fun like space battles. If you can throw that on a big screen, I think maybe you can enjoy some of that stuff. K2SO is funny. But I think those are like really the only parts, and I could just watch those as clips on YouTube rather than watching the whole movie. Kerri, what do you think about Rogue One?
Okay. I don't know. I really like this one. I don't know. For me, I think part of why I like it so much is it's, even though it leads into the Skywalker saga, really none of these characters, except for Darth Vader, towards the end, like none of them have anything to do with the Skywalkers. And like, I don't know, for me, it's just a little bit more, you could watch it apart from the rest of the films, and it's very self-contained. And for me, that actually like increases its rewatchability. I like that it kind of expands the universe a little bit more. We're kind of getting a little bit apart from the same characters and the same tropes we kind of see in each of the different trilogies. I think most of this movie is pretty fast paced. It has a lot of really, really excellent action. I think it was just very well filmed. And for me, this one actually had, I know everyone's like shitting on the character development, but for me, this actually is like one of the most emotional impacts of any of the Star Wars films. It's definitely the only Star Wars movie I've ever cried at. Maybe you just need to kill someone off, and you like show me someone the whole movie and then kill them off in the end. That makes me sad.
Have an actual permadeath in the movie.
Yeah.
Like with what Palpatine wasn't dead, but actually.
And I don't care about, I don't want Palpatine to come back or anything.
Hey,
so.
those are also some great points, Kerri, and I love how we can see these movies in different ways. And sometimes you don't care about the character development all that much, or maybe it works for you. There's no right answer, so that's why our lists are different. I'm sorry, did I cut you off? Or
no, I'm
okay.
done. We can do Revenge of the Sith.
Let's do Revenge of the Sith.
Wait. Yes, we can do Revenge of the Sith.
Let's do Revenge of the Sith. Charles, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, we can talk about Revenge of the Sith. Okay, so I have that as my number 3. And I think this is a good movie despite George Lucas. I think for me, it shows the worst day of the Jedi Order in most of its entirety. And I love that because I'm not a big fan of the Jedi Order. It shows the arrogance of Mace Windu. It shows the passivity of Yoda. It shows the lack of empathy from Obi-Wan that led to all of this destruction of the Jedi Order and the rise of the Sith. Let me get this straight. Yoda got multiple hallucinations of Anakin committing war crimes, and then talked to Anakin, was just like, that's bad. Like, be careful, we can't trust him. Let's not make him a master, but also not do anything about that whole situation. Like, what are you doing, Yoda? Or Obi-Wan, Anakin oftentimes being this close to telling him about Padme, but doesn't, because why would you tell Obi-Wan? This is a dude that has basically has not been the most empathetic when someone is showing emotions around him. And then Mace Windu, complete arrogance. The fact that he was going to commit another war crime and kill a political leader without a trial. That's another thing. Whenever I see, why did Anakin turn to the dark side? He had 3 of his major mentors. They all had moments where they could have prevented all of this from happening. And they chose the wrong decision again and again and again. And so for me, yes, it's terrible to see Anakin fall to the dark side, but this is also their fault too. And provides a really wonderful direction for the new trilogy to go in, investigating why the Jedi are flawed and it doesn't work, and why the Sith is so seductive. The Sith is so seductive because the Jedi are so awful. Like, imagine telling a kid that was a slave that, like, oh, that's really bad what happened to your mom, but like, you shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't have like done all of this bad negative violence, but like, we're still going to make you a general and put you in charge of this war. Like, just I don't see a way that Anakin can't turn to the dark side with how he's treated throughout the entire movie and the second movie. I think it also brings a glimpse into a future without Jedi too, a brighter one too. We get to see some moments with Senator Organa that are pretty great, like where we get to see Organa actually make changes and make the tough decisions, and he is not a Jedi. Senator Organa may be one of the most active characters in the movie. He's consistently in rooms telling Jedi, we got to do something about this. And the Jedi are like, let's wait. Let's listen to the Emperor again. And if we look at kind of how he kind of ends the war in like a week, it also shows the passivity of the Jedi Order and how crumbling it is. The fact that Anakin, one man, can end both the Jedi Order and he can end an intergalactic war in a week is outstanding. And the fact that he was able to do that in a week and the Jedi Order couldn't do it after, like, through a decade is wild to me, and also shows the Jedi Order is flawed. So there's a lot of things I can talk about Revenge of the Sith for, but because my main thing that I enjoy about Star Wars is looking at the Jedi Order and the Sith through more a nuanced view and less of a black and white view, Revenge of the Sith gives me the most ammo for that. And that's why I have it so high.
Perfect. All right, Dylan, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, it's almost 2:00, so I'm gonna be a little quick, but yeah, I love it. It's the first one I saw in theaters. It's the one that got me into Star Wars. I think for that reason, it's always gonna be higher. I'm a little bit of a basic bitch. I have the top 3 being the original trilogy. So like, out of the original trilogy though, outside of it, this is like my favorite because I just get that nostalgia for seeing it the first time, but also, like Charles said, the rich complexity of the Sith and the Jedi and the blurred lines and just the seduction to the dark side. I love all that. I think the action's strong. There's some great set pieces. It does have those moments of cool down though that we've been talking about, where the characters can debrief and talk, but then it gets into the next action set piece. It's really fun. All the characters have great ends, even if they're tragic ones. Like I think it's tragic what happens with Anakin, but also with Yoda and Obi-Wan and Padme. Like, they really do fulfill these arcs, not necessarily satisfyingly for the character, but satisfyingly for the audience from a story perspective. So I just really love it. It's dark, but it's also just so good. Hayden Christensen, say what you will, I think he gives a fine performance. It's not a great performance, but I think it's a fine performance, especially with the people who are writing and directing it, or the person who's writing and directing it, and the direction he was given. I think he transcends it better than he does in Attack of the Clones. Overall, just really, really solid film. Love Grievous, great additional character. Love the anatomy. Love all the different lightsaber wieldings and all that. So, big fan of this.
Yeah, I agree. I really, really like this one. I have it in my top 4, and I think the reason I have this one so high is because the first 2 movies in that trilogy, aren't great, and they're kind of forgettable, and you don't really like them. No one really tries to defend them. I mean, you have some, but like no one like seriously has to defend them. But this one elevates that so much. It like it gives us like a satisfying conclusion of that story that we were promised. So I know I'm not like the guy that's like talking about the trilogies and stuff like that, but in this case, I think it takes the first 2 films that are like, I don't really care about the story, and it makes you care. It makes you care about Anakin and Padme and all this stuff that's going on. The Plagueis scene is like one of the best scenes I think in Star Wars. Where it's just like, the line, like, not, you can't learn that from a Jedi and stuff like that. I think that's because Palpatine is so, convincing, just like what Charles said, like, because the Jedi, they kind of like slowly make them seem not as like high up here, but more so like here, like you can understand why Anakin would go to the dark side. And I think they do that so well. And I actually really like Hayden Christensen in this movie. I think he's like significantly better in the this one. I think the problem with it is just like the writing of some of the dialogue, but I think his actual performance is pretty great. But that's just me. I know, it's a different, kind of thing with other people. And yeah, I just think like every kind of moment in this movie is just elevated because it seems like they're really trying with this one. Where the first two, they weren't. Maybe they were resting on the fact of this is Star Wars, so people will like it regardless. We don't really have to try. And in this one, they're like, no, we're gonna actually like sell this. We're gonna like show that this is a good story, and we want to make you feel for these characters and make you like kind of you feel that betrayal, even though there wasn't that much setup between Obi-Wan and Anakin. You still feel that. How did they do that in one movie where the first two movies you're like, I don't really care about the relationship between Anakin and Obi-Wan, and in the third movie you're like, wow. And that whole Mustafar, is it Mustafar with the volcano? That whole sequence is still really cool and really like, oh my god. And like when he's like melting away and stuff like that, my heart goes out and I just like really get emotional. And I just don't know how they did that in one movie when they didn't have much setup in the first two. So I really like that one a lot. Kerri, what do you think about this one?
Okay. So this one was, I think I actually rated this the lowest of anyone. And a big part of that is I think the relationship between Anakin and Padme is still so cringe. I think there's actually less bad dialogue. This one of the prequels, I think, has the best dialogue, but I think there's still, entire scenes that the dialogue is just pretty bad. But definitely my favorite of the prequels because it has so many cool parts. Like, I think, like Chad said, the relationship between Obi-Wan and Anakin in this movie is really strong. I think that, like Charles said, the concepts in this movie are really, really interesting. From that perspective, it is like one of the most interesting Star Wars movies. Yeah, that's kind of it.
Great. Yeah, James, what do you think about this one? Revenge
So it definitely is the best of the prequel series. I agree. I do agree that the dialogue itself does kind of hurt the movie. Like the forces themselves really aren't that bad. And to me, what I noticed, like in some of the lightsaber fights, like it seemed to be more like acrobatic in this one. Like they gave him like rifle squad training and told him like have a wooden rifle replica and like twirl it in the air and whip it around your body a whole bunch of times and then finally go to fight. To this one, it just seemed more like I think some of the lightsaber fights were a little bit more, I'll say, acrobatic. I don't know if you rewatch it. There's too much like waving around and flying around. And like I said, the dialogue does kind of hurt it, but the performances, pretty much. Especially the Mustafar fight with Anakin and Obi-Wan is just too flashy. I think we'll call it flashy. Maybe compared to some of the other movies themselves. And like I said, the dialogue does kind of hurt the whole, your new empire, like you'll try and all that. Like Anakin, you're hurting me. Like I don't know. To me, it takes away from what is there and is like more important to look at. I think like what you can take away from it is kind of like hindered by the dialogue itself. This was definitely the best of the first three, and I put it middle of the pack just because I enjoyed some of the other movies a little more than this one.
Great. Yeah. I just don't think the dialogue bothers me as much, but maybe on a rewatch it will. Okay. So now we're going to get into our threes, right?
We could actually talk about Return of the Jedi.
That's right. Return of the Jedi. So we'll go ahead and start with Dylan.
Yay. Thanks for starting with me because it's my number one. It's my favorite Star Wars movie. I just think that trilogy I love so much. It's my 1, 2, 3. Won't spoil which is where, but I mean, you could probably figure it out. But Return of the Jedi, it's such a great culmination of those three movies. Like it just ends on such a satisfying ending, but doesn't forget about the dark sides of the literal dark side of the trilogy and the themes and that whole conflict inside Vader of light and dark and the whole redemption, but also that he doesn't get to live because he has to kind of atone for his sins, like all that. I love it. I love the ending for Vader and the whole throne room, but I like the other stuff too. I think the Ewoks add a little bit of levity that some people think is a little too much, but I really enjoy. I have a thing for cuddly, cute animated bears. I love Ted. I love Winnie the Pooh. I love Paddington. So, obviously I love the Ewoks. Yeah, there they are. And if the Ewok movies were in this ranking, they would be low, but they wouldn't be at the bottom. I really do love the Ewoks. I do like Lando's arc. I love the whole opening with Jabba's palace. It just has some of the most iconic scenes for me. It's the one I watched the most as a kid. It's the one that I think holds up the best just because it has that sense of finality. Like, yes, the newest 3 trilogy, it's great, but also, like, if this was where it ended, it would still be a satisfying ending for me. And it still feels like it. And I like both the old song that they sang at the end with the Ewoks and the new one that they added to all the Disney Plus. I like both of the songs. I have them both on all my playlists. So that's a change that I didn't mind. And we do get Jar Jar in that last scene if you look closely, which is pretty fun in the Disney Plus re-release. But yeah, I like Return of the Jedi. I think it just kind of hits on all the right notes, whereas like Star Wars is maybe a little too light, and Empire Strikes Back ends maybe a little dark. I think this one kind of has that perfect blend of both. It's almost like a bittersweet movie, and I love it all the more for that. So yeah, and the green lightsaber's cool too.
Yeah, perfect. I love that we started with Dylan because I know he loves that one so much. I do as well. I recently saw it at the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra with Kerri and Charles. So they had they're playing the score live, and it was really cool. Such a great way to see it. Yeah, but I mean, I didn't grow up with this. I think as far as like George Lucas, like after the fact changes go, I think the best one is in this one where they add Hayden Christensen at the end as the Force Ghost.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's a really cool change that they made to kind of add some continuity in the thing. All the other weird little CGI creatures that walk past the screen and take up the entire frame. No, thank you. But that one's a pretty great
Even though
one.
I don't know if Luke would have known though. Like, he was probably like, "Who's that guy?" He's like, "Oh wait, that's my dad. He's younger." 'Cause he never got to see his dad younger. But hey,
maybe he
as an audience member, yeah, it works.
Maybe he intuits it as like a force. He's like he knows through the force that's his pop. But yeah, no, this is definitely a great movie. I ranked it number 5. Just because there's so many more movies in this, I think, that just work for me more on an emotional level, more on a story level, and just like a realistic kind of level. But I do think this is a phenomenal trilogy capper, and just a lot of great things in it that work, space battles, and I really like the Ewok stuff as well. And just a lot of really great character moments. This concludes Luke's original arc, which is really cool, and he's just a very strong character in this one because of the one. But it didn't have to do as much work as Revenge of the Sith did, and I think that's why I appreciate Revenge of the Sith a little bit more, is because it did so much work, and that's so good because of that. Even if Return of the Jedi might be the better movie overall. Our favorites versus best is sometimes different, but yeah, I really enjoy this one. I totally understand why it's Dylan's favorite. So Gary, what do you think about Return of the Jedi?
Yeah, this is also my number 1.
Woo!
For a lot of the same reasons Dylan said, I'm a sucker for a really happy ending, and they kind of acknowledge in this last one kind of the bad things that have happened along the way, but it is truly a happy ending. We see, we get classic Leia and Han kissed, and I don't know, everything. There's fireworks and everyone's cheering all across the world. And I don't know, I just really love that. I love the Ewoks. I think they're so funny. But it's hard. I think I shift in my top 3 is all the original trilogy, and I think it does shift often, which is my favorite. But overall, this one is usually my favorite, just because. And I think it's a very well-paced movie. I think we get to seeing the payoff of the prior 2 movies for me just makes this one the best.
Great, James, what do you think about this one?
I like Return of the Jedi a lot, actually. That's my number 2. I like the way everything gets wrapped up. I love the rotating shots between the Forestman of Endor battle, and then all the space battles and the lightsaber fights with Luke and Vader, and then the Emperor gets involved. So I liked how it wrapped everything up. I liked the kind of scale of the action was really good. It's definitely one of the better ones in the original trilogy. That's all I gotta say, though.
Perfect. Charles, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, Return of the Jedi is a great movie. I used to be my favorite when I was a kid. Those darn Ewoks. Jabba beginning is amazing. I appreciate that, Dylan. You mentioned the Jabba beginning. That whole Jabba sequence is just awesome. And some of my favorite memories about Star Wars and what Star Wars meant to me was that sequence, just seeing everybody work together and like just, I mean, it's maybe why I like Solo so much is because Solo is just basically 3 Jabba sequences back to back.
Right.
And it's a lot of heists. So I love that. It made me really excited to watch the beginning of that. But I do feel like similar to Rise of Skywalker, but significantly not to the worst degree that does. It does not have the guts to execute on a few things that Empire built on. I think where it did have the guts to execute was with the Luke, Darth Vader, and Palpatine stuff. That is the best part of that movie, and I love it. To this day, I think everything about Luke's arc, Darth Vader's arc, his journey is executed so perfectly in that movie. And now when I rewatch it, that being the one consistent thing that is carried over across 6 films, when we cut away from it to Han Solo in front of like a door and Leia in front of a door, and then we cut to other people in a spaceship doing the same like run that they did in the first movie, I'm just like, okay, like, can we just go back to Luke, please? Like, that's the stuff I care about the most in this movie. And so I just kind of, I wish like it's revisionist, but if it was made today, I would maybe say to keep all of that to a minimum and keep it a very character-centered or family-centered story and just focus on the Skywalkers completely the entire movie. And I think I would have really enjoyed it. But overall, it's a great movie, and I can understand why it's a lot of people's favorites. It's a good movie.
Perfect. All right. So Kerri wants to fix something, so we're gonna cut.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Can everyone actually, not me, Chad, where is Return of the Jedi on your list?
It is my number 5.
Your number 5. Okay. And Charles, where is it on your list?
Number 6.
Number
Just
6.
Say a name and people will tell you.
Okay. So I had it as someone's 4, so that's not right. And James, you had it as your number 2, right?
We could do this at the end as well.
Can everyone just go through? I know.
I had James. I had it as James number 4. What was your number 4, James?
Oh, A New Hope.
A New Hope. Gotcha.
Did I get those wrong? Maybe when we talked about them early.
Did someone else have A New Hope as their 4 as well? Because I already had a 4.
It was me. Yeah.
Okay, so that's what it was. Okay, perfect. All right,
cool.
Resume.
3, 2, 1. All right. So, are we at 3s now that we're going through?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. I don't know where we're at, so I'll start with my 3. My 3 is the original Star Wars. Kerri, what is your 3?
My 3 is also the original Star Wars.
James.
I had Rogue One.
Charles.
Revenge of the Sith.
Dylan.
My number 3 is also the original Star Wars.
Perfect. All right. So I think we can talk about that here then.
Yes.
I'll go ahead and start since I started with that. Okay. The original Star Wars, I don't know. I mean, in a way, it's like a perfect movie because it's that, it nails the whole, this is a fantasy film set in a science fiction type world, like space and the ships and stuff like that, but it's a fantastical film, and that it has religion, it has the whole mystical force thing, which I think is so great. Some people don't believe in it and some people believe in it so much, and Luke is our hero, and we go on, and you can watch that movie as the perfect like hero's journey. It hasn't been done before, yes, and not in this way. And so you can watch that. There's a great villain, one of the most iconic villains ever, with Darth Vader, and just everything just like works in the story to just give you just a satisfying story. We don't need Empire, we don't need Return of the Jedi. You just have a great story in that one movie. And I think that's where this one succeeds where Empire and Return of the Jedi, you can't just watch Empire, in my opinion. You can't just watch Return of the Jedi. You need those other movies for those two to have a great, satisfying ending, because Empire, it just, cuts off here, cuts off there. And it's like, okay, it's a middle movie. Is it one of the best of that middle movie? Maybe. A lot of people love that one. A lot of people compare middle films and trilogies to that movie, and they go, it's the Empire of the trilogy. Sure. But Star Wars is that one. It has the great bookends, the journey, whatever. It does have some flaws for me, like Luke's adoptive mother and father, just they're incinerated and he barely gives a shit. He just shows up and he goes, he looks down for a second, and that's his whole mourning period. There's like, let's go on to an adventure now. And then, like I said, the whole thing with the lightsaber and Obi-Wan just not really caring about him, just wielding it around like nonchalantly. And so there's just a lot of little things that I think that they didn't really think about in that, but I think those are nitpicks, honestly. And they're just, for me, coming from the outside, not growing up with these as kids, or, having parents that were like huge Star Wars fans, or like, you gotta love this movie too, because, I love this movie. And I think because I don't have that attachment, I can look at it from a different perspective. And, but it is a great movie. I did vote this as the best picture of that year. I think it's fantastic. It's good enough to be my number 3. And Kerri, what do you think about Star Wars?
I love this movie. It is also, like you said, it's my number 3 as well. It's just a fantastic movie. It's hard to find a lot of fault with it. I guess the acting could be a little better, but also at the same time, in so many of these roles, right? Like, I can't see anyone else in them. And I think that is the sign of, great casting and a great movie. And I guess that's more to do with the whole trilogy as a package. But I don't know. I love how this one, it's definitely just like a little bit more lighthearted. It's a really enjoyable watch. It's hard. I don't know. It's hard to say. It's like just watching this is so nostalgic, and you see why this became like one of the most popular franchises in the world.
And it's groundbreaking with what it did for technology and all that stuff and filmmaking. But James, Star Wars.
I think I agree with a lot of what you two kind of already said. I grew up watching these. We watched these as kids, so I've always liked these 3 over what has come out later. We had the original VHSs. We had the special edition VHSs. So that's kind of how I grew up watching these. Definitely one of my favorites, but I kind of like the other 2 a little more in this trilogy. But I'll just kind of piggyback off of what you and Kerri have kind of said. It's definitely a really good one, but I just like the other ones a little bit more.
Charles, Star Wars.
Yeah, Star Wars is a great movie. Nothing bad really to say about it. It builds a structure that the rest of the movies really rely on, and it leaves a lot of elements about the Jedi Order and the Sith in the dark. So it kind of, in a way, sometimes could feel post-apocalyptic in some ways, because a lot of it is about you're in the future, but a lot of it is discovering the secrets of the past. So it's a great movie.
All right, yeah, Dylan, Star Wars.
It's a classic. I'm not going to harp on it because we have 2 movies that I think require a little bit more in-depth analysis. This one's just the classic. It's the one that set it all up. Everything I said earlier about world building when I talked about why I love Star Wars can apply to this. So just copy and paste that. I don't actually, but in your brains, people watching, copy and paste what I said earlier about George Lucas's world building here.
Perfect. All right. So are we doing our number 2s now? And if so, Kerri, go on with your number 2.
Yes, we are doing our number 2s. So my number 2 is The Empire Strikes Back.
Jane.
Yay.
Mine was Return of the Jedi.
Charles.
Last Jedi.
Dylan.
My number 2 is also The Empire Strikes Back.
And my number 2 is also The Last Jedi.
Oh,
look at
so
that,
we already
Chad.
talked about your number 1, Chad. Wow, nice.
We did. My number 1 was The Force Awakens.
That's right.
Best Star Wars movie ever made.
Okay, well, we can do The Last Jedi and then The Empire Strikes Back, and that's it.
Right? Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, that's it.
All right, Kerri, start with Empire.
Well, no, we should start with The Last Jedi because that was lower ranked.
Kerri, start with The Last Jedi.
Okay, so this one I had at number 6, so kind of right in the middle. I really like this one. I like where it took The Force Awakens. I thought it did interesting things with the characters. I loved the scenes between Rey and Luke, and between Rey and Kylo. I actually liked that Kylo like turns and kills Snoke.
No.
I thought that was like I think like what makes like I think Kylo is at his best in this movie, honestly, because it is like one of the scenes where you don't know which way he's gonna go. I think up until it happens on the first watch, and to me, that's like one of the most interesting things you can do with a character is like where they're so divided that you as an audience member, you honestly don't know which way it's gonna go. I, I think this movie does have some faults. Part of it is that it just gets completely reversed in the next movie. I don't know. I initially really liked the scenes with Rose and Finn, and I really like Rose as a character. But I do think overall that whole sequence, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but ultimately they fail and it doesn't pay off. And to me, that does really impact the rewatchability because for all of those chunks of scenes, I'm like, it doesn't even fucking matter. Like, who cares?
Right.
That actually is the most negative thing, honestly, I can say about this movie. Otherwise, I really, really enjoy it.
Great. James, Last Jedi.
So this one was number 10 on my list. I don't usually walk out of theaters and be like, I hated that, but I walked out of theater with watching this one. I was like, I did not like that. In my opinion, I mean, I didn't like them killing off Snoke like that. If they're going to introduce a new trilogy, if they're going to introduce new characters, we should be able to find out more about these, and at least to some degree, a more degree than what we got, because he is in that hologram in the end of The Force Awakens, and he's like, all right, bring Kylo to me and we'll complete his training. And then halfway through, he gets cut in half. And when you see Kylo's hand gesture to the lightsaber, I'm like, all right, here it comes. He's going to kill this guy. And that's all we're going to get from this. So, I mean, I did like the focus on Kylo Ren in this one, but in like the scene in the casino was kind of weird. I didn't like. I mean, I like Benicio del Toro. They didn't do as much with him as they could have. I always like anything he's in, so that's one of the reasons I'll go back to this movie if I have to. I didn't like the whole. What was that line between Rose and Finn? Like we save what we
This
love.
is how we win by saving what we love.
Yeah, that thing. Like to me, like in the earlier movies, when Leia's like, "I love you," when Han Solo's like, "I know," like that kind of sets the, I think at least, the overall tone for like romance in this for the most part. Like it's not overly, to me, it's not supposed to necessarily be like that. So that part to me was kind of weird. That was also after she like T-bone crashes her speeder into his, and they all just kind of stand up like we're not, there's no injury, there's none. If you look in that scene, they're getting rocked around in the cockpits of those ships. Those restraints aren't doing that much, and you're going to T-bone crash this guy. Like, I'm sorry, but no one's getting up like that. And I would have almost liked to see Finn try to like sacrifice himself into that huge Star Destroyer cannon thing they're rolling towards the last stand of all the rebels. So I don't know. To me, it didn't necessarily work. There wasn't. I just didn't like this movie, and the whole alien titty milk, that was kind of weird. But that's only one of those scenes, so I guess I can forgive it. But I didn't like The Last Jedi that much, so that's just my take on it. This was number 10 for me. So
You're definitely not alone, James. Charles,
there you have it.
Last Jedi.
Yeah, Last Jedi, I could talk about an hour and a half about this movie. It is, I completely agree. Like, it's really frustrating that sometimes you're watching things and in the scheme of things, nothing, like, it doesn't really matter. And I could say that about the Jedi and the Sith. And I think that's what this whole movie is about. It centers one primary conflict between Kylo and Rey. And essentially, Rey represents the Jedi for the majority of the movie, and Kylo represents the Sith. That's the primary conflict. And everything outside of it, you're right, doesn't matter at all, like in the scheme of things. the armies don't matter, the casualties don't matter, the plans don't matter, the death in saving people doesn't matter. It's just the same conflict we've seen over and over and over again. And Rey and Kylo finally have a chance to end all of this. And at least for a little while they do, until the Rise of Skywalker destroys all of that. But for a little while they do actually talk about why the Jedi are awful and why the Sith are awful and why do we have to be one or the other? Why can't we be something else? And that's what Star Wars should have been going towards. And if it really had faith in executing that, I would be just so excited for the future. And that was the last Star Wars movie I watched where I had no idea what direction it was going in. I had no idea what was going to happen next. And I can't say the same for any other Star Wars movie, really. I think in general, the thing that's really wonderful is it treats the old characters as characters and not nostalgia props. I love Luke's character. I love his arc. I love the final conversation between him and Yoda. And the frustration that I see from fans about it is common, and it's healthy to have that frustration. But in order for us to move on and move into a brighter future, sometimes we do have to burn away the past. And The Last Jedi did a wonderful job of doing that. It's a shame that we couldn't see the future that it was building up to.
Absolutely. Dylan, Last Jedi.
Yeah, I agree. I love how it kind of tears down everything, and I love the final shot being just that kid with a broom. It's like kind of showing that anyone can be anything, and that's kind of cool.
Yes.
It kind of goes to the whole Rey thing as well. The only thing that I don't love about it's my number 6, so it's like close. Like my whole top, not like I love all the 9 Skywalker saga movies. It's my number 6 only because I like the other 5 above. I think sometimes the comedy, especially with the Hux stuff in the beginning, feels a little tonally inconsistent with the rest of the movie. Like it almost felt a little bit more similar to the Family Guy Star Wars parodies than the Star Wars movies we've seen themselves. And that's not a negative thing. I just wish then it was consistent throughout the whole film and not just in that first chunk. Because that first bit is really funny, but then as it goes along, it gets a little more serious. I wish it kept that tone throughout or didn't have it at all. It just feels a little mishmash there, but everything else I think is awesome. I think the design also, this is my favorite looking Star Wars movie. I like this even better than Force Awakens and how it looks. I think it looks gorgeous. I love the design of Crate, the salt planet where underneath the salt is this red rock. I love that, and almost kind of gives it like a blood in the snow type look. I really love it all. It's so well designed, so well crafted. It sets up so many interesting things that I personally think Rise of Skywalker pays off some of it more than others like to believe, but I do agree that like this would have been a very fun concluding point. I think honestly this might have been where they should have ended it, and then just continued doing the spin-offs and stuff, because I think this kind of encompasses everything that Star Wars is, and then ends it on a beautiful note of the kid looking up at the sky. It's like it can be anyone, it can be anything. This can be any story. It doesn't have to be a Skywalker story. And the next one retcons that a little bit, but I still think, this film does a lot of good. The only thing also I don't love is that Phasma, they didn't really build her up to be anything, they kind of just, she was kind of a nonsense character. And for Gwendolyn Christie being such a good actress, like how do you not give her a better arc and better character? And I feel like Rian Johnson was just like, I don't really know what to do with her. Let's have Finn just kill her off. I would have liked for her to like at least live to be part of the final movie, or him give her a little bit more in this movie so it was a fitting send off. Like I think Snoke, while it was kind of a shock and kind of upsetting to see him go so early because he's such a great character, I still think they built up his character well enough so when he died it was like, okay, we got what we needed from him. Whereas like Phasma, I was like, I wanted more, especially because she's also a central part of the parks. If you see the stormtroopers walking through the Disney parks, like she's leading them, she's the leader of the stormtroopers. She's got a lot of stuff that I wish they had developed on more, but I think it's great. I think Kelly Marie Tran is great. She doesn't deserve any of the hate she gets. Rose is an amazing character. I love it. Luke is awesome in this also as well. It's the Laurie Strode thing of like the tortured old soul that we had this perfect image of the past, but no one is the same as they were 40 years before. You know what I mean? It's like people are gonna change, and I think this movie emphasizes that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to piggyback right off of that because you said some of my favorite things. I think this is the second best Star Wars film ever made, because I like Luke in the original trilogy, but I love Luke in the first two movies here in the Disney sequel, because I love gruff old man Luke who's jaded. He doesn't care anymore until he's like made to, and then he shows up at the end and he does like the greatest kind of like passive Jedi move that I think makes what actually should a Jedi should be. And yeah, I just think The Last Jedi just kind of encompasses, I love how it like strips everything down and it focuses on, I think, what the story that matters, the characters that matter, like Kylo, Rey, and a lot of that. They get rid of Snoke, they get rid of Phasma. I don't really care about those, to be honest. And I love how they do it. And I love how they show the questioning of what is right, what is wrong, what is Jedi, what is Sith. And they show it in a great visual way. And there's just so much of this movie that I adore that I see that I don't think other people are seeing when they hate on the movie. And, we all see these differently, so that's fine. But I really adore this one. And it's Star Wars to me, whereas other ones, a little bit less. So let's get into Empire. Charles, start with Empire.
Yeah, it's my number one, and it's my number one because I think it's a perfect movie. It's one of the best ever made. It brought the darkness that Star Wars needs to be truly great. It deepened the character relationships, and it did start the conversation about critiquing the passivity of the Jedi Order, finding out that Vader was Luke Skywalker's father and was that same Jedi that turned away. Like, it's not a big reveal anymore now because we've grown up for it, but back then it is such a perfect moment of adding another layer to the Jedi that are romanticized and glorified. It adds another layer of, man, these people that were heroes, that were glorified and were romanticized, this one guy basically is the reason why all of this bad stuff has happened. Wait, like, Jedi can't be perfect then. And I love that. I love any nuanced discussion about Empire. I'm going to hop off here, and I apologize that the end of this has been really short, but I really appreciated talking with you all about Star Wars.
Yeah,
it was nice to meet you too, Dylan.
Yeah, nice to meet you, Charles.
I'll see you, but thank you, y'all.
Thank you for the great discussion, Charles.
Right, see you, Charles.
Bye.
All right, Dylan, go ahead and tell us about Empire.
Yeah, it's interesting because the ones I think higher on everyone's list are like a little bit require less discussion because there's not as much to criticize. Like, I think Empire, I don't have much to say that hasn't been said by everyone in the world. Like, it's such a great movie. It bridges the gap between the first and third film so well. It leaves you excited for what's going to happen next, but leaves you also kind of in a state of like confusion, like what is going on. This almost feels to me like The Last Jedi of that trilogy, in the sense that like people left that movie. I remember, well, I don't remember because I wasn't there, but I remember hearing people left that movie being like, what the hell was that? Like, he's his dad and he just left him to die, and now no one's happy, and Han Solo's gone too, and everyone's in a bad place. Like, I think that's what, with time, we've come to be like, oh yeah, that movie's great. But back then, like, no, like, people had the same response as Last Jedi. So I'm almost wondering if Last Jedi in the next few decades will get more of the reception that this movie has gotten, because I think it does essentially a similar thing. It's like, take everything you know, throw it out the window. This is not what you thought it was, and we're going to go in this darker direction because of it. I think it's very well stylized. I love the different planets they go to. Hoth is such a cool, well-realized vision. I love the Cloud City. I love Bespin. I love what's the other planet they're at? Oh, Dagobah with Yoda. I love that as well, and the Yoda stuff. I think it has a similar vibe in Last Jedi in that it does have those action-packed moments, but then it has time to sit with the characters and meditate. The Yoda stuff is very meditative. I love that. Love the dream sequence where Vader visits Luke and his head cuts off and it's Luke in the helmet. Like, all that is just so exciting, and it just goes to show the big leap from Star Wars, which is just this wide-eyed like adventure story, to then jump to this film, which is like just so much deeper and more complex, and like just diving into so many different interesting themes. I love the original, but I think this one just takes it and enriches it even more. And I love it. I think having a different director was really smart. Like Kerri said, having a different editor was very smart. And just making it not solely George Lucas's thing. Like, George Lucas had a big say in it. He wrote it, but it's like there are other voices now to kind of flesh out the stories and make them more interesting visually and textually and thematically. So I really, really, really like this film. It just, I didn't want to pick it as my number one because it almost seems a little, cliche, but for good reason. I mean, it's a great film. But I did want to put Return of the Jedi as my number one because I just find a little bit more enjoyment of it. Because again, like I said, Empire Strikes Back is a downer. But it's one of those downers where I'm like, ooh, that was a good movie when I'm done with it. So really great movie. I can see why it's Charles and James's number one. It's really good.
Great points, man. Yeah, I want to start off by saying that it's terrible that Charles had to leave when he did, because I know how much he adores that film and he thinks it's perfect, and wants to gush about it, but he just didn't really have the time there, so that was sad. So I'm going to start off with my positives for Empire because there's a lot. It's a great film. I love the Dagobah stuff. I love the what is it? Do there is no try. Do or do not, there's no try. I love that. We have Yoda as our topper on the Christmas tree. I love his appearance in The Last Jedi. He's a great character when they don't do him dirty in the prequels. And everything with that. Yeah, there's just so much in Empire that is really fun and really cool, and battles and Death Star stuff, and a lot of things like that. I think for me, where I lower it a little bit is the iconic scene at the end. I do not like. I don't like Mark Hamill's acting in the first two movies of the trilogy. I think he's much better in Return of the Jedi, and then way better in the Disney sequel series. And when he is whining at the end, it's justified. There's a reason why he's so confused. He's surprised. We're
lost
all
his arm.
surprised. He lost his arm. But the acting takes me out of it when he's like, no. I'm like, oh my God.
Very Sean Penn, Mystic River.
Yes. I'm like, calm down, Mark Hamill. I don't know. I just think like the acting takes it out, takes me away from it. And like, I think just ending on that too, while it's nuanced and really cool, I think it does kind of detract from it being a great standalone film. And I think that's why I put Star Wars above it. And I just think, the other Force Awakens and Last Jedi just have like more interesting, fun elements to it. And so I kind of agree with Dylan because it's such a downer of a movie. It's great, but it's not one that I just want to watch all the time, like Force Awakens and Last Jedi. So, but still a great movie. Obviously, most people ranked it number one. I ranked it number 6. It is what it is. Kerri, sorry, Empire.
I had this as my number 2. Just a little bit lower than Last Jedi, I think, for reasons similar to Dylan, just because it's a little bit of a downer. It ends on multiple cliffhangers, which is really exciting, but then I'm just like, okay, now I'm gonna go watch Return of the Jedi because I need to see the conclusion. But overall, this is just one of the best movies ever made, and it was just so innovative for its time. I don't know, the acting doesn't really take me too far out of it, just because I think everything else, like the story elements, are just so exciting. That's kind of what I got. It's hard to say anything else about this movie because it's so amazing.
Definitely. James, Empire.
Yeah, I just like the overall sense of peril that you get from pretty much this entire movie. They're like losing at every turn, and just definitely not a good day for them. I know Charles said it was like the Empire, the Jedi's worst day, and Revenge of the Sith, and this definitely is a really, really bad day for them, and it just kind of carries throughout the whole movie. So I just can't get over like I said, the sense of peril that you get, or just the overall sense of defeat that comes with this movie. So I like everything about this movie, and that's definitely my number 1.
That's what's up. Great. This was a great discussion. We've talked about them all, correct?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So we're
holiday special. No, I'm kidding.
Go ahead.
That is my number 1.5. No, I'm kidding. No, it is fun. It's a fun watch if you've never seen it. It's an interesting watch. It's a trippy watch, but it's its own entity. It's its own unique thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of ancillary. There's a lot of different stuff like the holiday special, the Clone Wars, and then all of the TV series that come out. And I've heard Andor's fantastic. I still need to check that out, and I'm very excited to. And I'm very excited for any future movies that come out. There's a potential maybe to revisit Star Wars down the line, and maybe we can rank some other things or whatever down the line. We'll see. But for now, we've ranked all 11 live action Star Wars films. Yeah, Kerri, do you have you ranking with me ranking?
Yes,
Okay.
and I think Dylan has also been keeping track, so he can correct me if I miscalculated anything or not. No worries. I think I double checked everything. Okay, so we have 2 ties in this ranking. So I'm gonna start with number 9, tie for 9th place, The Rise of Skywalker and Attack of the Clones. Tied for
Makes
8th
sense.
place, Solo and the Phantom Menace.
Makes sense.
And then at number 7, we have Rogue One. At number 6, The Last Jedi. At number 5, Revenge of the Sith. At number 4, The Force Awakens. At number 3, A New Hope. At number 2, Return of the Jedi. And no surprises here, at number 1, The Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, definitely not a surprise. I think it's a solid ranking. I do think the original trilogy just does definitely get more, because of its iconic nature and like what it did for filmmaking. I think it gets more hype than it deserves. But that being said, I still think we did a great job, and I was outranked, and I'm mad about it. But that's okay. Let's go around and Kerri, you have anything to plug or any last words about Star Wars?
Yeah, well, just from having calculated this perspective, this was very interesting because I think our bottom few and our top few wound up all kind of mostly being very similar.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, we were very mixed. Our scores were all over the place. We had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Wait for it. So that means our top 5, in all of our top 5s, there were like 8 or 9 different movies, and this is only 11 movies overall. So that in itself, I think, is very interesting.
And even though I'm that dumb like objector who likes to shake things up and Empire's not that good, middle
contrarian, if you will.
Contrarian, yeah. Even though I'm like that, I love that we're all different and we're all have like different thoughts. Like, everybody was sitting there talking about Rogue One, and James was like, I really enjoy it, and then Charles, Dylan, and I were kind of like, the characters aren't that great and whatever, and then Kerri's like, but I really like the character. So it's different for different people and enjoyment, whatever. So
and what's interesting is on most people's rankings too, like Rogue One is usually like high. Like I think that was the biggest hot take of this ranking, is that collectively, I think most people are in line with like James and Kerri, and like it's in their top 3s or 4s, whereas like Miu and Charles are a little bit more cold on it. But I think that just goes to show, like, it depends on the panel too. Like I bet if you get 4 other people in here, Rogue One could be your number 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. James, any last words, plugs, whatever?
Not really, man. I think it went about as good as it could have. I realized with my ranking, like, it was almost compartmentalized within the 3 trilogies themselves, because like the original trilogy is better in my opinion than like the sequels. The prequels, me, are only better than the sequels because we got more memes out of the prequels. Like, just the dialogue was just that terrible. You just get awesome memes out of it. And I think it goes for like when you saw these movies like in your lifetime also, because I started with the originals, so they're all with the first trilogy, so they're going to be the best overall. True. And like I was younger when the prequels came out, so like just the whole spectacle of the CGI was cool to me, so that's why they kind of ranked a little bit higher than the sequels. So that's just what I found like when I kind of ranked them, but it could change for anyone, like we see in our list. I mean, it's anyone's opinion, anything goes, really.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Dylan, any final words or plugs?
No, I agree with James. The meme culture is great. I actually, if you go back and edit this, I switched my name up like 4 times throughout our recording of just different memes.
I noticed it.
At this point, I've settled on "Hello there" is where I've settled right now. But there was a Watto meme, a Sand meme. It was a fun time. The memes are great in Star Wars because at the end of the day, as great as these movies are, they're a little cheesy. They're a little hokey, and that's what made them so special, though. Is the
I mean, it's true.
Yeah, it's people running around with laser swords and aliens on different planets, and it's a silly premise, but it's great. I love it, and yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching, and yeah, check out Dill Pickle Movie Network. Chad's on a show there called Picture This. We did a Star Wars episode way back when, And yeah, that's all I got to plug.
Absolutely, yeah. And check out the Nerd Entertainment Network. We do Welcome to Prime Time, where we talk about horror and Buffy and play fun games. We're playing a fun game tonight, so you check that out. And otherwise, this was great. Thank you, everybody. It was just always fun talking about Star Wars, one of the greatest franchises ever. Looking forward to seeing what comes next out of there. I got to check out Andor. I hear it's fantastic. And thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe. Watch our other videos. We have Harry Potter, Edgar Wright, MCU, horror. We got Scream, Evil Dead. We got a Christmas tier ranking, and we're planning to do some more Christmas. We don't know exactly what. We might do something like our top 10s or top 15s because it's hard to choose. We love a lot of Christmas movies around here. And then we're planning on doing like Quentin Tarantino and I don't know, just a lot of other things. Spider-Man. And we're doing our big Disney animated 61 movie ranking that we've
thought this one was long.
Yeah, we've been preparing for this for months, and we're going to have to do it in a different way so that we can actually not make this one be 6 hours long. But thank you very much for watching, and everybody, are you ranking with me?
That's why I'm here.